Chapter 15. Impeached. Neville Landless had started so early and walked at so good a pace that when the church bells began to ring in Cloisterham for morning service, he was 8 miles away. As he wanted his breakfast by that time, having set forth on a crust of bread, he stopped at the next roadside tavern to refresh visitors in want of breakfast, unless they were horses or cattle, for which class of guests there was preparation enough in the way of water trough and hay, were so unusual at the sign of the tilted wagon, that it took a long time to get the wagon into the track of tea and toast and bacon. Neville, in the interval, sitting in a sanded parlour, wondering in how long a time after he had gone the sneezy fire of damp faggots would begin to make somebody else warm. Truly, the tilted wagon, as a cool establishment on the top of a hill, where the ground before the door was puddled with damp hoofs and trodden straw, where a scolding landlady slapped a moist baby with one red sock on and one wanting, in the bar, where the cheese was cast aground upon a shelf, in company with a mouldy tablecloth and a green-handled knife, in a sort of cast-iron canoe, where the pale-faced bread shed tears of crumb over its shipwreck in another canoe, where the family linen, half-washed and half-dried, led a public life of lying about, where everything to drink was drunk out of mugs, and everything else was suggestive of a rhyme to mugs. The tilted wagon, all these things considered, hardly kept its painted promise of providing good entertainment for man and beast. However, man, in the present case, was not critical, but took what entertainment he could get, and went on again after a longer rest than he needed. He stopped at some quarter of a mile from the house, hesitating whether to pursue the road or to follow a cart track between 2 high hedgerows, which led across the slope of a breezy heath, and evidently struck into the road again by and by. He decided in favor of this latter track, and pursued it with some toil, the rise being steep, and the way worn into deep ruts. He was laboring along, when he became aware of some other pedestrians behind him. As they were coming up at a faster pace than his, he stood aside, against one of the high banks, to let them pass. But their manner was very curious. Only 4 of them passed. Other 4 slackened speed, and loitered as intending to follow him when he should go on. The remainder of the party, half a dozen perhaps, turned and went back at a great rate. He looked at the 4 behind him, and he looked at the 4 before him. They all returned his look. He resumed his way. The 4 in advance went on, constantly looking back. The 4 in the rear came closing up. When they all ranged out from the narrow track upon the open slope of the heath, and this order was maintained, let him diverge as he would to either side, there was no longer room to doubt that he was beset by these fellows. He stopped as a last test, and they all stopped. "Why do you attend upon me in this way?" he asked the whole body. "Are you a pack of thieves?" "Don't answer him," said one of the number. He did not see which. "Better be quiet." "Better be quiet," repeated Neville. "Who said so?" Nobody replied. "It's good advice, whichever of you skulkers gave it," he went on angrily. "I will not submit to be penned in between 4 men there, and 4 men there. I wish to pass, and I mean to pass, those 4 in front." They were all standing still, himself included. "If 8 men, or 4 men, or 2 men, set upon one," he proceeded, growing more enraged, "the one has no chance but to set his mark upon some of them. And, by the Lord, I'll do it if I am interrupted any farther." Shouldering his heavy stick, and quickening his pace, he shot on to pass the 4 ahead. The largest and strongest man of the number changed swiftly to the side on which he came up, and dexterously closed with him and went down with him, but not before the heavy stick had descended smartly. "Let him be," said this man in a suppressed voice, as they struggled together on the grass. "Fair play. His is the build of a girl to mine, and he's got a weight strapped to his back besides. Let him alone. I'll manage him." After a little rolling about, in a close scuffle which caused the faces of both to be besmeared with blood, the man took his knee from Neville's chest, and rose, saying, "There. Now take him arm in arm, any 2 of you." It was immediately done. "As to our being a pack of thieves, Mr. Landless," said the man, as he spat out some blood and wiped more from his face, "you know better than that at midday. We wouldn't have touched you if you hadn't forced us. We're going to take you round to the high road, anyhow, and you'll find help enough against thieves there, if you want it. Wipe his face. Somebody, see how it's trickling down him. When his face was cleansed, Neville recognized in the speaker Joe, driver of the Cloisterham omnibus, whom he had seen but once, and that on the day of his arrival. And what I recommend you for the present is don't talk, Mr. Landless. You'll find a friend waiting for you at the high road, bun ahead by the other way when we split into two parties, and you had much better say nothing till you come up with him. Bring that stick along, somebody else, and let's be moving. Utterly bewildered, Neville stared around him and said not a word. Walking between his two conductors, who held his arms in theirs, he went on, as in a dream, until they came again into the high road and into the amid of a little group of people. The men who had turned back were among the group, and its central figures were Mr. Jasper and Mr. Crisparkle. Neville's conductors took him up to the Minor Canon, and there released him, as an act of deference to that gentleman. What is all this, sir? What is the matter? I feel as if I had lost my senses, cried Neville, the group closing in around him. Where is my nephew? Asked Mr. Jasper, wildly. Where is your nephew? Repeated Neville. Why do you ask me? I ask you, retorted Jasper, because you were the last person in his company, and he is not to be found. Not to be found, cried Neville, aghast. Stay, stay, said Mr. Crisparkle. Permit me, Jasper. Mr. Neville, you are confounded. Collect your thoughts. It is of great importance that you should collect your thoughts. Attend to me. I will try, sir, but I seem mad. You left Mr. Jasper last night with Edwin Drood. Yes. At what hour? Was it at 12 o'clock? Asked Neville, with his hand to his confused head and appealing to Jasper. Quite right, said Mr. Crisparkle. The hour Mr. Jasper has already named to me. You went down to the river together, undoubtedly, to see the action of the wind there. What followed? How long did you stay there? About 10 minutes. I should say not more. We then walked together to your house, and he took leave of me at the door. Did he say that he was going down to the river again? No, he said that he was going straight back. The bystanders looked at one another and at Mr. Crisparkle, to whom Mr. Jasper, who had been intensely watching Neville, said, in a low, distinct, suspicious voice, "What are those stains upon his dress?" All eyes were turned towards the blood upon his clothes. "And here are the same stains upon the stick," said Jasper, taking it from the hand of the man who held it. "I know the stick to be his, and he carried it last night. What does this mean? In the name of God, say what it means, Neville," urged Mr. Crisparkle. "That man and I," said Neville, pointing out his late adversary, "had a struggle for the stick just now, and you may see the same marks on him, sir. What was I to suppose, when I found myself molested by 8 people? Could I dream of the true reason when they would give me none at all?" They admitted that they had thought it discreet to be silent and that the struggle had taken place, and yet the very men who had seen it looked darkly at the smears which the bright cold air had already dried. "We must return, Neville," said Mr. Crisparkle. "Of course you will be glad to come back to clear yourself." "Of course, sir. Mr. Landless will walk at my side," the Minor Canon continued, looking around him. "Come, Neville." They set forth on the walk back, and the others, with one exception, straggled after them at various distances. Jasper walked on the other side of Neville and never quitted that position. He was silent, while Mr. Crisparkle more than once repeated his former questions, and while Neville repeated his former answers, also, while they both hazarded some explanatory conjectures. He was obstinately silent because Mr. Crisparkle's manner directly appealed to him to take some part in the discussion, and no appeal would move his fixed face. When they drew near to the city, and it was suggested by the Minor Canon that they may do well in calling on the mayor at once, he assented with a stern nod, but he spake no word until they stood in Mr. Sapsea's parlor. Mr. Sapsea being informed by Mr. Crisparkle of the circumstances under which they desired to make a voluntary statement before him, Mr. Jasper broke silence by declaring that he placed his whole reliance, humanly speaking, on Mr. Sapsea's penetration. There was no conceivable reason why his nephew should have suddenly absconded, unless Mr. Sapsea could suggest one, and then he would defer. There was no intelligible likelihood of his having returned to the river and been accidentally drowned in the dark, unless it should appear likely to Mr. Sapsea, and then again he would defer. He washed his hands as clean as he could of all horrible suspicions, unless it should appear to Mr. Sapsea that some such were inseparable from his last companion before his disappearance, not on good terms with previously, and then, once more, he would defer. His own state of mind, he being distracted with doubts and laboring under dismal apprehensions, was not to be safely trusted, but Mr. Sapsea's was. Mr. Sapsea expressed his opinion that the case had a dark look, in short, and here his eyes rested full on Neville's countenance and un-English complexion. Having made this grand point, he wandered into a denser haze and maze of nonsense than evening a mayor may have been expected to disport himself in, and came out of it with a brilliant discovery that to take the life of a fellow creature was to take something that didn't belong to you. He wavered whether or no he should at once issue his warrant for the committal of Neville Landless to jail, under circumstances of grave suspicion, and he may have gone so far as to do it but for the indignant protest of the minor canon, who undertook for the young man's remaining in his own house, and being produced by his own hands, whenever demanded. Mr. Jasper then understood Mr. Sapsea to suggest that the river should be dragged, that its banks should be rigidly examined, that particulars of the disappearance should be sent to all outlying places and to London, and that placards and advertisements should be widely circulated imploring Edwin Drood, if for any unknown reason he had withdrawn himself from his uncle's home and society, to take pity on that loving kinsman's sore bereavement and distress, and somehow inform him that he was yet alive. Mr. Sapsea was perfectly understood, for this was exactly his meaning, though he had said nothing about it, and measures were taken towards all these ends immediately. It would be difficult to determine which was the more oppressed with horror and amazement, Neville Landless or John Jasper, but that Jasper's position forced him to be active, while Neville's forced him to be passive. There would have been nothing to choose between them. Each was bowed down and broken. With the earliest light of the next morning, men were at work upon the river, and other men, most of whom volunteered for the service, were examining the banks. All the livelong day the search went on upon the river, with barge and pole and drag and net, upon the muddy and rushy shore, with jack-boots, hatchet, spade, rope, dogs, and all imaginable appliances. Evening at night, the river was specked with lanterns, and lurid with fires. Far-off creeks, into which the tide washed as it changed, had their knots of watchers, listening to the lapping of the stream, and looking out for any burden it may bear. Remote shingly causeways near the sea, and lonely points off which there was a race of water, had their unwonted flaring cressets and rough-coated figures when the next day dawned. But no trace of Edwin Drood revisited the light of the sun. All that day, again, the search went on, now in barge and boat, and now ashore among the osiers, or tramping amidst mud and stakes and jagged stones in low-lying places, where solitary watermarks and signals of strange shapes showed like spectres. John Jasper worked and toiled, but to no purpose, for still no trace of Edwin Drood revisited the light of the sun. Setting his watches for that night again, so that vigilant eyes should be kept on every change of tide, he went home exhausted, unkempt and disordered, bedaubed with mud that had dried upon him, and with much of his clothing torn to rags. He had but just dropped into his easy chair, when Mr. Grudis stood before him. "This is strange news," said Mr. Grudis. "Strange and fearful news." Jasper had merely lifted up his heavy eyes to say it, and now dropped them again as he drooped, worn out, over one side of his easy chair. Mr. Grudis smoothed his head and face, and stood looking at the fire. "How is your ward?" asked Jasper, after a time, in a faint, fatigued voice. "Poor little thing. You may imagine her condition. Have you seen his sister? Inquired Jasper as before. Whose? The curtness of the counter question, and the cool, slow manner in which, as he put it, Mr. Grewgious moved his eyes from the fire to his companion's face, may at any other time have been exasperating. In his depression and exhaustion, Jasper merely opened his eyes to say, "The suspected young man's." "Do you suspect him?" asked Mr. Grewgious. "I don't know what to think. I cannot make up my mind." "Nor I," said Mr. Grewgious. "But as you spoke of him as the suspected young man, I thought you had made up your mind. I have just left Miss Landless." "What is her state?" "Defiance of all suspicion, and unbounded faith in her brother." "Poor thing! However," pursued Mr. Grewgious, "it is not of her that I came to speak. It is of my ward. I have a communication to make that will surprise you. At least, it has surprised me." Jasper, with a groaning sigh, turned wearily in his chair. "Shall I put it off till to-morrow?" said Mr. Grewgious. "Mind, I warn you, that I think it will surprise you." More attention and concentration came into John Jasper's eyes as they caught sight of Mr. Grewgious smoothing his head again and again looking at the fire, but now with a compressed and determined mouth. "What is it?" demanded Jasper, becoming upright in his chair. "To be sure," said Mr. Grewgious, provokingly slowly and internally, as he kept his eyes on the fire, "I may have known it sooner. She gave me the opening, but I am such an exceedingly angular man that it never occurred to me. I took all for granted." "What is it?" demanded Jasper once more. Mr. Grewgious, alternately opening and shutting the palms of his hands as he warmed them at the fire, and looking fixedly at him sideways, and never changing either his action or his look in all that followed, went on to reply. "This young couple, the lost youth and Miss Rosa, my ward, though so long betrothed, and so long recognizing their betrothal, and so near being married, Mr. Grewgious saw a staring white face and two quivering white lips in the easy chair, and saw two muddy hands gripping its sides. But for the hands, he may have thought he had never seen the face. This young couple came gradually to the discovery made on both sides pretty equally, I think, that they would be happier and better, both in their present and their future lives, as affectionate friends, or say rather as brother and sister, than as husband and wife." Mr. Grewgious saw a lead-colored face in the easy chair, and on its surface dreadful starting drops or bubbles, as if of steel. This young couple formed at length the healthy resolution of interchanging their discoveries openly, sensibly, and tenderly. They met for that purpose. After some innocent and generous talk, they agreed to dissolve their existing and their intended relations for ever and ever. Mr. Grewgious saw a ghastly figure rise, open-mouthed, from the easy chair, and lift its outspread hands towards its head. "One of this young couple, and that one your nephew, fearful, however, that in the tenderness of your affection for him you would be bitterly disappointed by so wide a departure from his projected life, forbore to tell you the secret for a few days, and left it to be disclosed by me, when I should come down to speak to you, and he would be gone. I speak to you, and he is gone." Mr. Grewgious saw the ghastly figure throw back its head, clutch its hair with its hands, and turn with a writhing action from him. "I have now said all I have to say, except that this young couple parted, firmly, though not without tears and sorrow, on the evening when you last saw them together." Mr. Grewgious heard a terrible shriek, and saw no ghastly figure, sitting or standing, saw nothing but a heap of torn and miry clothes upon the floor. Chapter 16. Devoted. When John Jasper recovered from his fit or swoon, he found himself being tended by Mr. and Mrs. Tope, whom his visitor had summoned for the purpose. His visitor, wooden of aspect, sat stiffly in a chair, with his hands upon his knees, watching his recovery. "There, you've come to nicely now, sir," said the tearful Mrs. Tope. "You were thoroughly worn out, and no wonder." "A man," said Mr. Grewgious, with his usual air of repeating a lesson, "cannot have his rest broken, and his mind cruelly tormented, and his body overtaxed by fatigue, without being thoroughly worn out. I fear I have alarmed you, Jasper apologized faintly when he was helped into his easy chair. Not at all, I thank you, answered Mr. Grugis. You are too considerate. Not at all, I thank you, answered Mr. Grugis again. You must take some wine, sir, said Mrs. Tope, and the jelly that I had ready for you, and that you wouldn't put your lips to at noon, though I warned you what would come of it, you know, and you not breakfasted, and you must have a wing of the roast fowl that has been put back 20 times if it's been put back once. It shall all be on table in 5 minutes, and this good gentleman belike will stop and see you take it. This good gentleman replied with a snort, which may mean yes or no or anything or nothing, and which Mrs. Tope would have found highly mystifying, but that her attention was divided by the service of the table. You will take something with me, said Jasper as the cloth was laid. I couldn't get a morsel down my throat. I thank you, answered Mr. Grugis. Jasper both ate and drank almost voraciously, combined with the hurry in his mode of doing it, was an evident indifference to the taste of what he took, suggesting that he ate and drank to fortify himself against any other failure of the spirits, far more than to gratify his palate. Mr. Grugis in the meantime sat upright, with no expression in his face, and a hard kind of imperturbably polite protest all over him, as though he would have said, in reply to some invitation to discourse, I couldn't originate the faintest approach to an observation on any subject whatever. I thank you. Do you know, said Jasper, when he had pushed away his plate and glass, and had sat meditating for a few minutes, do you know that I find some crumbs of comfort in the communication with which you have so much amazed me? Do you? Returned Mr. Grugis, pretty plainly adding the unspoken clause. I don't, I thank you. After recovering from the shock of a piece of news of my dear boy, so entirely unexpected, and so destructive of all the castles I had built for him, and after having had time to think of it, yes, I shall be glad to pick up your crumbs, said Mr. Grugis dryly. Is there not, or is there, if I deceive myself, tell me so, and shorten my pain, is there not, or is there hope that, finding himself in this new position, and becoming sensitively alive to the awkward burden of explanation in this quarter, and that, and the other, with which it would load him, he avoided the awkwardness, and took to flight? Such a thing may be, said Mr. Grugis, pondering. Such a thing has been. I have read of cases in which people, rather than face a 7 days' wonder, and have to account for themselves to the idle and impertinent, have taken themselves away, and been long unheard of. I believe such things have happened, said Mr. Grugis, pondering still. When I had, and could have, no suspicion, pursued Jasper, eagerly following the new track, that the dear lost boy had withheld anything from me, most of all, such a leading matter as this. What gleam of light was there for me in the whole black sky? When I supposed that his intended wife was here, and his marriage close at hand, how could I entertain the possibility of his voluntarily leaving this place, in a manner that would be so unaccountable, capricious, and cruel? But now that I know what you have told me, is there no little chink through which day pierces? Supposing him to have disappeared of his own act, is not his disappearance more accountable and less cruel? The fact of his having just parted from your ward is in itself a sort of reason for his going away. It does not make his mysterious departure the less cruel to me, it is true, but it relieves it of cruelty to her. Mr. Grugis could not but assent to this. An evening as to me, continued Jasper, still pursuing the new track, with ardor, and, as he did so, brightening with hope. He knew that you were coming to me. He knew that you were entrusted to tell me what you have told me. If your doing so has awakened a new train of thought in my perplexed mind, it reasonably follows that, from the same premises, he may have foreseen the inferences that I should draw. Grant that he did foresee them. An evening the cruelty to me, and who am I? John Jasper, music master, vanishes. Once more, Mr. Grugis could not but assent to this. I have had my distrusts, and terrible distrusts they have been, said Jasper, but your disclosure, overpowering as it was at first, showing me that my own dear boy had had a great disappointing reservation from me, who so fondly loved him, kindles hope within me. You do not extinguish it when I state it, but admit it to be a reasonable hope. I begin to believe it possible," here he clasped his hands, "that he may have disappeared from among us of his own accord, and that he may yet be alive and well." Mr. Crisparkle came in at the moment. "To whom Mr. Jasper repeated, I begin to believe it possible that he may have disappeared of his own accord, and may yet be alive and well." Mr. Crisparkle taking a seat, and inquiring, "Why so?" Mr. Jasper repeated the arguments he had just set forth. If they had been less plausible than they were, the good minor canon's mind would have been in a state of preparation to receive them, as exculpatory of his unfortunate pupil. But he, too, did really attach great importance to the lost young man's having been, so immediately before his disappearance, placed in a new and embarrassing relation towards every one acquainted with his projects and affairs, and the fact seemed to him to present the question in a new light. "I stated to Mr. Sapsea, when we waited on him," said Jasper, as he really had done, "that there was no quarrel or difference between the two young men at their last meeting. We all know that their first meeting was unfortunately very far from amicable, but all went smoothly and quietly when they were last together at my house. My dear boy was not in his usual spirits, he was depressed, I noticed that, and I am bound henceforth to dwell upon the circumstance the more, now that I know there was a special reason for his being depressed, a reason, moreover, which may possibly have induced him to absent himself. I pray to heaven it may turn out so," exclaimed Mr. Crisparkle. "I pray to heaven it may turn out so," repeated Jasper. "You know, and Mr. Grewgious should now know likewise, that I took a great prepossession against Mr. Neville Landless, arising out of his furious conduct on that first occasion. You know that I came to you, extremely apprehensive, on my dear boy's behalf, of his mad violence. You know that I evening entered in my diary, and showed the entry to you, that I had dark forebodings against him. Mr. Grewgious ought to be possessed of the whole case. He shall not, through any suppression of mine, be informed of a part of it, and kept in ignorance of another part of it. I wish him to be good enough to understand that the communication he has made to me has hopefully influenced my mind, in spite of its having been, before this mysterious occurrence took place, profoundly impressed against young Landless." This fairness troubled the minor canon much. He felt that he was not as open in his own dealing. He charged against himself reproachfully that he had suppressed, so far, the 2 points of a second strong outbreak of temper against Edwin Drood on the part of Neville, and of the passion of jealousy having, to his own certain knowledge, flamed up in Neville's breast against him. He was convinced of Neville's innocence of any part in the ugly disappearance, and yet so many little circumstances combined so woefully against him, that he dreaded to add 2 more to their cumulative weight. He was among the truest of men, but he had been balancing in his mind, much to its distress, whether his volunteering to tell these 2 fragments of truth, at this time, would not be tantamount to a piecing together of falsehood in the place of truth. However, here was a model before him. He hesitated no longer, addressing Mr. Grewgious, as one placed in authority by the revelation he had brought to bear on the mystery and surpassingly angular Mr. Grewgious became, when he found himself in that unexpected position. Mr. Crisparkle bore his testimony to Mr. Jasper's strict sense of justice, and, expressing his absolute confidence in the complete clearance of his pupil from the least taint of suspicion, sooner or later, avowed that his confidence in that young gentleman had been formed, in spite of his confidential knowledge that his temper was of the hottest and fiercest, and that it was directly incensed against Mr. Jasper's nephew, by the circumstance of his romantically supposing himself to be enamored of the same young lady. The sanguine reaction manifest in Mr. Jasper was proof evening against this unlooked-for declaration. It turned him paler, but he repeated that he would cling to the hope he had derived from Mr. Grewgious, and that if no trace of his dear boy were found, leading to the dreadful inference that he had been made away with, he would cherish unto the last stretch of possibility the idea that he may have absconded of his own wild will. Now, it fell out that Mr. Crisparkle going away from this conference still very uneasy in his mind, and very much troubled on behalf of the young man whom he held as a kind of prisoner in his own house, took a memorable night walk. He walked to Cloisterham Weir. He often did so, and consequently there was nothing remarkable in his footsteps tending that way. But the preoccupation of his mind so hindered him from planning any walk, or taking heed of the objects he passed, that his first consciousness of being near the weir was derived from the sound of the falling water close at hand. "How did I come here?" was his first thought as he stopped. "Why did I come here?" was his second. Then he stood intently listening to the water. A familiar passage in his reading about airy tongues that syllable men's names rose so unbidden to his ear that he put it from him with his hand as if it were tangible. It was starlight. The weir was full 2 miles above the spot to which the young men had repaired to watch the storm. No search had been made up here, for the tide had been running strongly down at that time of the night of Christmas Eve, and the likeliest places for the discovery of a body, if a fatal accident had happened under such circumstances, all lay, both when the tide ebbed and when it flowed again, between that spot and the sea. The water came over the weir with its usual sound on a cold starlight night, and little could be seen of it. Yet Mr. Crisparkle had a strange idea that something unusual hung about the place. He reasoned with himself. What was it? Where was it? Put it to the proof. Which sense did it address? No sense reported anything unusual there. He listened again, and his sense of hearing again checked the water coming over the weir with its usual sound on a cold starlight night. Knowing very well that the mystery with which his mind was occupied may of itself give the place this haunted air, he strained those hawk's eyes of his for the correction of his sight. He got closer to the weir and peered at its well-known posts and timbers. Nothing in the least unusual was remotely shadowed forth. But he resolved that he would come back early in the morning. The weir ran through his broken sleep all night, and he was back again at sunrise. It was a bright frosty morning, the whole composition before him, when he stood where he had stood last night, was clearly discernible in its minutest details. He had surveyed it closely for some minutes, and was about to withdraw his eyes, when they were attracted keenly to one spot. He turned his back upon the weir, and looked far away at the sky and at the earth, and then looked again at that one spot. It caught his sight again immediately, and he concentrated his vision upon it. He could not lose it now, though it was but such a speck in the landscape. It fascinated his sight. His hands began plucking off his coat, for it struck him that at that spot, a corner of the weir, something glistened, which did not move and come over with the glistening water drops, but remained stationary. He'd assured himself of this. He threw off his clothes, he plunged into the icy water, and swam for the spot. Climbing the timbers, he took from them, caught among their interstices by its chain, a gold watch, bearing engraved upon its back E.D. He brought the watch to the bank, swam to the weir again, climbed it, and dived off. He knew every hole and corner of all the depths, and dived and dived and dived, until he could bear the cold no more. His notion was that he would find the body. He only found a shirt-pin sticking in some mud and ooze. With these discoveries he returned to Cloisterham, and, taking Neville Landless with him, went straight to the mayor. Mr. Jasper was sent for. The watch and shirt-pin were identified. Neville was detained, and the wildest frenzy and fatuity of evil report rose against him. He was of that vindictive and violent nature that, but for his poor sister, who alone had influence over him, and out of whose sight he was never to be trusted, he would be in the daily commission of murder. Before coming to England he had caused to be whipped to death sundry natives, nomadic persons, encamping now in Asia, now in Africa, now in the West Indies, and now at the North Pole, vaguely supposed in Cloisterham to be always black, always of great virtue, always calling themselves me, and everybody else massa or missy according to sex, and always reading tracts of the obscurest meaning, in broken English, but always accurately understanding them in the purest mother tongue. He had nearly brought Mrs. Crisparkle's grey hairs with sorrow to the grave. Those original expressions were Mr. Sapsea's. He had repeatedly said he would have Mr. Crisparkle's life. He had repeatedly said he would have everybody's life, and become in effect the last man. He had been brought down to Cloisterham, from London, by an eminent philanthropist, and why? Because that philanthropist had expressly declared, "I owe it to my fellow creatures that he should be, in the words of Bentham, where he is the cause of the greatest danger to the smallest number." These dropping shots from the blunderbusses of blunderheadedness may not have hit him in a vital place, but he had to stand against a trained and well-directed fire of arms of precision too. He had notoriously threatened the lost young man, and had, according to the showing of his own faithful friend and tutor who strove so hard for him, a cause of bitter animosity created by himself, and stated by himself, against that ill-starred fellow. He had armed himself with an offensive weapon for the fatal night, and he had gone off early in the morning, after making preparations for departure. He had been found with traces of blood on him. Truly, they may have been wholly caused as he represented, but they may not, also. On a search warrant being issued for the examination of his room, clothes, and so forth, it was discovered that he had destroyed all his papers and rearranged all his possessions on the very afternoon of the disappearance. The watch found at the weir was challenged by the jeweler as one he had wound and set for Edwin Drood at 20 minutes past 2 on that same afternoon, and it had run down before being cast into the water, and it was the jeweler's positive opinion that it had never been rewound. This would justify the hypothesis that the watch was taken from him not long after he left Mr. Jasper's house at midnight, in company with the last person seen with him, and that it had been thrown away after being retained some hours. Why thrown away? If he had been murdered, and so artfully disfigured, or concealed, or both, as that the murderer hoped identification to be impossible, except from something that he wore, assuredly the murderer would seek to remove from the body the most lasting, the best known, and the most easily recognizable things upon it. Those things would be the watch and shirt pin. As to his opportunities of casting them into the river, if he were the object of these suspicions, they were easy, for he had been seen by many persons wandering about on that side of the city, truly on all sides of it, in a miserable and seemingly half-distracted manner. As to the choice of the spot, obviously such criminating evidence had better take its chance of being found anywhere rather than upon himself, or in his possession. Concerning the reconciliatory nature of the appointed meeting between the two young men, very little could be made of that in young Landless's favor, for it distinctly appeared that the meeting originated, not with him, but with Mr. Crisparkle, and that it had been urged on by Mr. Crisparkle, and who could say how unwillingly, or in what ill-conditioned mood, his enforced pupil had gone to it. The more his case was looked into, the weaker it became in every point. Evening the broad suggestion that the lost young man had absconded was rendered additionally improbable on the showing of the young lady from whom he had so lately parted, for what did she say, with great earnestness and sorrow, when interrogated? That he had, expressly and enthusiastically, planned with her, that he would await the arrival of her guardian, Mr. Grewgious, and yet, be it observed, he disappeared before that gentleman appeared. On the suspicions thus urged and supported, Neville was detained and redetained, and the search was pressed on every hand, and Jasper labored night and day. But nothing more was found, no discovery being made, which proved the lost man to be dead. It at length became necessary to release the person suspected of having made away with him. Neville was set at large. Then a consequence ensued which Mr. Crisparkle had too well foreseen. Neville must leave the place, for the place shunned him and cast him out. Evening had it not been so, the dear old China shepherdess would have worried herself to death with fears for her son, and with general trepidation occasioned by their having such an inmate. Evening had that not been so, the authority to which the minor canon deferred officially would have settled the point. "Mr. Crisparkle," quoth the dean, "human justice may err, but it must act according to its lights. The days of taking sanctuary are past. This young man must not take sanctuary with us." "You mean that he must leave my house, sir?" "Mr. Crisparkle," returned the prudent dean, "I claim no authority in your house. I merely confer with you. on the painful necessity you find yourself under of depriving this young man of the great advantages of your counsel and instruction. It is very lamentable, sir, Mr. Crisparkle represented. Very much so, the dean assented. And if it be a necessity, Mr. Crisparkle faltered. As you unfortunately find it to be, returned the dean. Mr. Crisparkle bowed submissively. It is hard to prejudge his case, sir, but I am sensible that. Just so, perfectly. As you say, Mr. Crisparkle, interposed the dean, nodding his head smoothly, there is nothing else to be done. No doubt, no doubt. There is no alternative, as your good sense has discovered. I am entirely satisfied of his perfect innocence, sir, nevertheless. Well, said the dean, in a more confidential tone, and slightly glancing around him, I would not say so, generally. Not generally. Enough of suspicion attaches to him to, no, I think I would not say so, generally. Mr. Crisparkle bowed again. It does not become us, perhaps, pursued the dean, to be partisans. Not partisans. We clergy keep our hearts warm and our heads cool, and we hold a judicious middle course. I hope you do not object, sir, to my having stated in public, emphatically, that he will reappear here whenever any new suspicion may be awakened or any new circumstance may come to light in this extraordinary matter. Not at all, returned the dean. And yet, do you know, I don't think, with a very nice and neat emphasis on those two words, I don't think I would state it emphatically. State it? Yes. But emphatically? No, I think not. In point of fact, Mr. Crisparkle, keeping our hearts warm and our heads cool, we clergy need do nothing emphatically. So Minor Canon Rowe knew Neville Landless no more, and he went whithersoever he would or could, with a blight upon his name and fame. It was not until then that John Jasper silently resumed his place in the choir. Haggard and red-eyed, his hopes plainly had deserted him, his sanguine mood was gone, and all his worst misgivings had come back. A day or two afterwards, while unrobing, he took his diary from a pocket of his coat, turned the leaves, and with an impressive look, and without one spoken word, handed this entry to Mr. Crisparkle to read. My dear boy is murdered. The discovery of the watch and shirt bin convinces me that he was murdered that night, and that his jewelry was taken from him to prevent identification by its means. All the delusive hopes I had founded on his separation from his betrothed wife, I give to the winds. They perish before this fatal discovery. I now swear, and record the oath on this page, that I never more will discuss this mystery with any human creature until I hold the clue to it in my hand, that I never will relax in my secrecy or in my search, that I will fasten the crime of the murder of my dear dead boy upon the murderer. Chapter 17. Philanthropy, Professional and Unprofessional. Full half a year had come and gone, and Mr. Crisparkle sat in a waiting room in the London chief offices of the Haven of Philanthropy until he could have audience of Mr. Honeythunder. In his college days of athletic exercises, Mr. Crisparkle had known professors of the noble Fisticuffs and had attended 2 or 3 of their gloved gatherings. He had now an opportunity of observing that as to the phrenological formation of the backs of their heads, the professing philanthropists were uncommonly like the pugilists. In the development of all those organs which constitute or attend a propensity to pitch into your fellow creatures, the philanthropists were remarkably favored. There were several professors passing in and out, with exactly the aggressive air upon them of being ready for a turn-up with any novice who may happen to be on hand, that Mr. Crisparkle well remembered in the circles of the fancy. Preparations were in progress for a moral little mill somewhere on the rural circuit, and other professors were backing this or that heavyweight as good for such or such speech-making hits, so very much after the manner of the sporting publicans, that the intended resolutions may have been rounds. in an official manager of these displays much celebrated for his platform tactics. Mr. Crisparkle recognized in a suit of black the counterpart of a deceased benefactor of his species, an eminent public character, once known to fame as Frosty-Faced Fogo, who in days of yore superintended the formation of the magic circle with the ropes and stakes. There were only 3 conditions of resemblance wanting between these professors and those. Firstly, the philanthropists were in very bad training, much too fleshy and presenting, both in face and figure, a superabundance of what is known to pugilistic experts as suet pudding. Secondly, the philanthropists had not the good temper of the pugilists and used worse language. Thirdly, their fighting code stood in great need of revision, as empowering them not only to bore their man to the ropes, but to bore him to the confines of distraction, also to hit him when he was down, hit him anywhere and anyhow, kick him, stamp upon him, gouge him, and maul him behind his back without mercy. In these last particulars the professors of the noble were much nobler than the professors of philanthropy. Mr. Crisparkle was so completely lost in musing on these similarities and dissimilarities, at the same time watching the crowd which came and went by, always, as it seemed, on errands of antagonistically snatching something from somebody, and never giving anything to anybody, that his name was called before he heard it. On his at length responding, he was shown by a miserably shabby and underpaid stipendiary philanthropist who could hardly have done worse if he had taken service with a declared enemy of the human race, to Mr. Honeythunder's room. "Sir," said Mr. Honeythunder, in his tremendous voice, like a schoolmaster issuing orders to a boy of whom he had a bad opinion, "sit down." Mr. Crisparkle seated himself. Mr. Honeythunder, having signed the remaining few score of a few thousand circulars, calling upon a corresponding number of families without means to come forward, stump up instantly and be philanthropists, or go to the devil. Another shabby stipendiary philanthropist, highly disinterested, if in earnest, gathered these into a basket and walked off with them. "Now, Mr. Crisparkle," said Mr. Honeythunder, turning his chair half round towards him when they were alone, and squaring his arms with his hands on his knees, and his brows knitted, as if he added, "I am going to make short work of you. Now, Mr. Crisparkle, we entertain different views, you and I, sir, of the sanctity of human life." "Do we?" returned the minor canon. "We do, sir." "May I ask you," said the minor canon, "what are your views on that subject?" "That human life is a thing to be held sacred, sir." "May I ask you," pursued the minor canon as before, "what you suppose to be my views on that subject?" "By George, sir," returned the philanthropist, squaring his arms still more as he frowned on Mr. Crisparkle, "they are best known to yourself." "Readily admitted. But you began by saying that we took different views, you know. Therefore, or you could not say so, you must have set up some views as mine." "Pray, what views have you set up as mine?" "Here is a man and a young man," said Mr. Honeythunder, as if that made the matter infinitely worse, and he could have easily borne the loss of an old one, swept off the face of the earth by a deed of violence. "What do you call that?" "Murder," said the minor canon. "What do you call the doer of that deed, sir?" "A murderer," said the minor canon. "I am glad to hear you admit so much, sir," retorted Mr. Honeythunder, in his most offensive manner, "and I candidly tell you that I didn't expect it." Here he lowered heavily at Mr. Crisparkle again. "Be so good as to explain what you mean by those very unjustifiable expressions." "I don't sit here, sir," returned the philanthropist, raising his voice to a roar, "to be browbeaten. As the only other person present, no one can possibly know that better than I do," returned the minor canon very quietly. "But I interrupt your explanation." "Murder," proceeded Mr. Honeythunder, in a kind of boisterous reverie, with his platform folding of his arms, and his platform nod of abhorrent reflection after each short sentiment of a word. "Bloodshed. Abel, Cain. I hold no terms with Cain. I repudiate with a shudder the red hand when it is offered me." Instead of instantly leaping into his chair and cheering himself hoarse, as the brotherhood in public meeting assembled would infallibly have done on this cue, Mr. Crisparkle merely reversed the quiet crossing of his legs and said mildly, "Don't let me interrupt your explanation when you begin it. The commandments say, no murder." "No murder, sir," proceeded Mr. Honeythunder, platformally pausing as if he took Mr. Crisparkle to task for having distinctly asserted that they said, "You may do a little murder," and then leave off. "And they also say, you shall bear no false witness," observed Mr. Crisparkle. "Enough," bellowed Mr. Honeythunder, with a solemnity and severity that would have brought the house down at a meeting. Enough. My late words being now of age, and I being released from a trust which I cannot contemplate without a thrill of horror. There are the accounts which you have undertaken to accept on their behalf, and there is a statement of the balance which you have undertaken to receive, and which you cannot receive too soon. And let me tell you, sir, I wish that, as a man and a minor canon, you were better employed," with a nod. "Better employed," with another nod. "Bet-ter employed," with another, and the three nods added up. Mr. Crisparkle rose, a little heated in the face, but with perfect command of himself. "Mr. Honeythunder," he said, taking up the papers referred to, "my being better or worse employed than I am at present is a matter of taste and opinion. You may think me better employed in enrolling myself a member of your society." "I, truly, sir," retorted Mr. Honeythunder, shaking his head in a threatening manner. "It would have been better for you if you had done that long ago. I think otherwise." "Or," said Mr. Honeythunder, shaking his head again, "I may think one of your profession better employed in devoting himself to the discovery and punishment of guilt than in leaving that duty to be undertaken by a layman. I may regard my profession from a point of view which teaches me that its first duty is towards those who are in necessity and tribulation, who are desolate and oppressed," said Mr. Crisparkle. "However, as I have quite clearly satisfied myself that it is no part of my profession to make professions, I say no more of that. But I owe it to Mr. Neville and to Mr. Neville's sister, and in a much lower degree to myself, to say to you that I know I was in the full possession and understanding of Mr. Neville's mind and heart at the time of this occurrence, and that, without in the least coloring or concealing what was to be deplored in him and required to be corrected, I feel certain that his tale is true. Feeling that certainty, I befriend him. As long as that certainty shall last, I will befriend him. And if any consideration could shake me in this resolve, I should be so ashamed of myself for my meanness, that no man's good opinion, no, nor no woman's, so gained, could compensate me for the loss of my own. Good fellow, manly fellow. And he was so modest, too. There was no more self-assertion in the minor canon than in the schoolboy who had stood in the breezy playing fields keeping a wicket. He was simply and staunchly true to his duty alike in the large case and in the small. So all true souls ever are. So every true soul ever was, ever is, and ever will be. There is nothing little to the really great in spirit. "Then who do you make out did the deed?" asked Mr. Honeythunder, turning on him abruptly. "Heaven forbid," said Mr. Crisparkle, "that in my desire to clear one man I should lightly criminate another. I accuse no one." "Tee-chaw!" ejaculated Mr. Honeythunder with great disgust, for this was by no means the principle on which the philanthropic brotherhood usually proceeded. "And, sir, you are not a disinterested witness, we must bear in mind." "How am I an interested one?" inquired Mr. Crisparkle, smiling innocently, at a loss to imagine. "There was a certain stipend, sir, paid to you for your pupil, which may have warped your judgment a bit," said Mr. Honeythunder coarsely. "Perhaps I expect to retain it still." Mr. Crisparkle returned, enlightened. "Do you mean that too?" "Well, sir," returned the professional philanthropist, getting up and thrusting his hands down into his trousers pockets, "I don't go about measuring people for caps. If people find I have any about me that fit they can put on and wear if they like. That's their look out, not mine." Mr. Crisparkle eyed him with a just indignation, and took him to task thus. Mr. Honeythunder, I hoped, when I came in here that I may be under no necessity of commenting on the introduction of platform manners or platform maneuvers among the decent forbearances of private life. But you have given me such a specimen of both, that I should be a fit subject for both if I remained silent respecting them. They are detestable. They don't suit you, I dare say, sir. They are, repeated Mr. Crisparkle, without noticing the interruption, detestable. They violate equally the justice that should belong to Christians and the restraints that should belong to gentlemen. You assume a great crime to have been committed by one whom I, acquainted with the attendant circumstances, and having numerous reasons on my side, devoutly believe to be innocent of it. Because I differ from you on that vital point, what is your platform resource? Instantly to turn upon me, charging that I have no sense of the enormity of the crime itself, but am its aider and abettor. So, another time, taking me as representing your opponent in other cases, you set up a platform credulity, unmoved, and seconded and carried unanimously profession of faith in some ridiculous delusion or mischievous imposition. I decline to believe it, and you fall back upon your platform resource of proclaiming that I believe nothing, that because I will not bow down to a false god of your making, I deny the true God. Another time you make the platform discovery that war is a calamity, and you propose to abolish it by a string of twisted resolutions tossed into the air like the tail of a kite. I do not admit the discovery to be yours in the least, and I have not a grain of faith in your remedy. Again, your platform resource of representing me as reveling in the horrors of a battlefield like a fiend incarnate. Another time, in another of your undiscriminating platform rushes, you would punish the sober for the drunken. I claim consideration for the comfort, convenience, and refreshment of the sober, and you soon make platform proclamation that I have a depraved desire to turn heaven's creatures into swine and wild beasts. In all such cases your movers, and your seconders, and your supporters, your regular professors of all degrees, run amok like so many mad Malays, habitually attributing the lowest and basest motives with the utmost recklessness. Let me call your attention to a recent instance in yourself for which you should blush, and quoting figures which you know to be as wilfully one-sided as a statement of any complicated account that should be all creditor's side and no debtor, or all debtor's side and no creditor. Therefore it is, Mr. Hunathunder, that I consider the platform a sufficiently bad example and a sufficiently bad school, evening in public life, but hold that, carried into private life, it becomes an unendurable nuisance. These are strong words, sir, exclaimed the philanthropist. I hope so, said Mr. Crisparkle. Good morning. He walked out of the haven at a great rate, but soon fell into his regular brisk pace, and soon had a smile upon his face as he went along, wondering what the China shepherdess would have said if she had seen him pounding Mr. Hunathunder in the late little lively affair, for Mr. Crisparkle had just enough of harmless vanity to hope that he had hit hard, and to glow with the belief that he had trimmed the philanthropic jacket pretty handsomely. He took himself to Staple Inn, but not to P.J.T. and Mr. Grewgious. Full many a creaking stair he climbed before he reached some attic rooms in a corner, turned the latch of their unbolted door, and stood beside the table of Neville Landless. An air of retreat and solitude hung about the rooms and about their inhabitant. He was much worn, and so were they. Their sloping ceilings, cumbrous rusty locks and grates, and heavy wooden bins and beams, slowly mouldering withal, had a prisonous look, and he had the haggard face of a prisoner. Yet the sunlight shone in at the ugly garret window, which had a penthouse to itself thrust out among the tiles, and on the cracked and smoke-blackened parapet beyond, some of the deluded sparrows of the place rheumatically hopped, like little feathered cripples who had left their crutches in their nests, and there was a play of living leaves at hand that changed the air, and made an imperfect sort of music in it that would have been melody in the country. The rooms were sparely furnished, but with good store of books. Everything expressed the abode of a poor student. That Mr. Crisparkle had been either chooser, lender, or donor of the books, or that he combined the three characters, may have been easily seen in the friendly beam of his eyes upon them as he entered. How goes it, Neville? I am in good heart, Mr. Crisparkle, and working away. I wish your eyes were not quite so large and not quite so bright, said the minor canon, slowly releasing the hand he had taken in his. They brighten at the sight of you, returned Neville. If you were to fall away from me, they would soon be dull enough. Rally, rally, urged the other in a stimulating tone. Fight for it, Neville. If I were dying, I feel as if a word from you would rally me. If my pulse had stopped, I feel as if your touch would make it beat again, said Neville. But I have rallied, and am doing famously. Mr. Crisparkle turned him with his face a little more towards the light. I want to see a ruddier touch here, Neville, he said, indicating his own healthy cheek by way of pattern. I want more sun to shine upon you. Neville drooped suddenly as he replied in a lowered voice, I am not hardy enough for that, yet. I may become so, but I cannot bear it yet. If you had gone through those Cloisterham streets as I did, if you had seen, as I did, those averted eyes, and the better sort of people silently giving me too much room to pass, that I may not touch them or come near them, you wouldn't think it quite unreasonable that I cannot go about in the daylight. My poor fellow, said the minor canon, in a tone so purely sympathetic that the young man caught his hand, I never said it was unreasonable, never thought so. But I should like you to do it, and that would give me the strongest motive to do it. But I cannot yet. I cannot persuade myself that the eyes of evening, the stream of strangers I pass in this vast city, look at me without suspicion. I feel marked and tainted evening when I go out, as I do only at night. But the darkness covers me then, and I take courage from it. Mr. Crisparkle laid a hand upon his shoulder and stood looking down at him. If I could have changed my name, said Neville, I would have done so. But as you wisely pointed out to me, I can't do that, for it would look like guilt. If I could have gone to some distant place, I may have found relief in that, but the thing is not to be thought of, for the same reason. Hiding and escaping would be the construction in either case. It seems a little hard to be so tied to a stake and innocent, but I don't complain. And you must expect no miracle to help you, Neville, said Mr. Crisparkle compassionately. No, sir, I know that. The ordinary fullness of time and circumstances is all I have to trust to. It will right you at last, Neville, so I believe, and I hope I may live to know it. But perceiving that the despondent mood into which he was falling cast a shadow on the minor canon, and it may be feeling that the broad hand upon his shoulder was not then quite as steady as its own natural strength had rendered it when it first touched him just now, he brightened and said, Excellent circumstances for study, anyhow. And you know, Mr. Crisparkle, what need I have of study in all ways, not to mention that you have advised me to study for the difficult profession of the law, specially, and that of course I am guiding myself by the advice of such a friend and helper, such a good friend and helper. He took the fortifying hand from his shoulder and kissed it. Mr. Crisparkle beamed at the books, but not so brightly as when he had entered. I gather from your silence on the subject that my late guardian is adverse, Mr. Crisparkle. The minor canon answered, Your late guardian is a most unreasonable person, and it signifies nothing to any reasonable person whether he is adverse, perverse, or the reverse. Well for me that I have enough with economy to live upon, sighed Neville, half wearily and half cheerily, while I wait to be learned, and wait to be righted. Else I may have proved the proverb, that while the grass grows, the steed starves. He'd opened some books as he said it, and was soon immersed in their interleaved and annotated passages, while Mr. Crisparkle sat beside him, expounding, correcting, and advising. The minor canon's cathedral duties made these visits of his difficult to accomplish, and only to be compassed at intervals of many weeks, but they were as serviceable as they were precious to Neville Landless. When they had got through such studies as they had in hand, they stood leaning on the window-sill and looking down upon the patch of garden. Next week, said Mr. Crisparkle, you will cease to be alone, and will have a devoted companion. And yet, returned Neville, this seems an uncongenial place to bring my sister to. I don't think so, said the minor canon. There is duty to be done here, and there are womanly feeling, sense, and courage wanted here. I meant, explained Neville, that the surroundings are so dull and unwomanly, and that Helena can have no suitable friend or society here. You have only to remember, said Mr. Crisparkle, that you are here yourself, and that she has to draw you into the sunlight. They were silent for a little while, and then Mr. Crisparkle began anew. When we first spoke together, Neville, you told me that your sister had risen out of the disadvantages of your past lives as superior to you as the tower of Cloisterham Cathedral is higher than the chimneys of Minor Canon Corner. Do you remember that? Right well. I was inclined to think it at the time an enthusiastic flight. No matter what I think it now. What I would emphasize is that under the head of pride your sister is a great and opportune example to you. Under all heads that are included in the composition of a fine character, she is. Say so, but take this one. Your sister has learnt how to govern what is proud in her nature. She can dominate at evening, when it is wounded through her sympathy with you. No doubt she has suffered deeply in those same streets, where you suffered deeply. No doubt her life is darkened by the cloud that darkens yours, but bending her pride into a grand composure that is not haughty or aggressive, but is a sustained confidence in you and in the truth. She has won her way through those streets until she passes along them as high in the general respect as any one who treads them. Every day and hour of her life, since Edwin Drood's disappearance, she has faced malignity and folly for you, as only a brave nature well directed can. So it will be with her to the end. Another and weaker kind of pride may sink broken-hearted, but never such a pride as hers, which knows no shrinking and can get no mastery over her. The pale cheek beside him flushed under the comparison, and the hint implied in it. I will do all I can to imitate her, said Neville. Do so, and be a truly brave man, as she is a truly brave woman, answered Mr. Crisparkle stoutly. It is growing dark. Will you go my way with me, when it is quite dark? Mind, it is not I who wait for darkness. Neville replied that he would accompany him directly, but Mr. Crisparkle said he had a moment's call to make on Mr. Grewgious as an act of courtesy, and would run across to that gentleman's chambers and rejoin Neville on his own doorstep, if he would come down there to meet him. Mr. Grewgious, bolt upright as usual, sat taking his wine in the dusk at his open window, his wineglass and decanter on the round table at his elbow, himself and his legs on the window seat, only one hinge in his whole body, like a bootjack. How do you do, reverend sir? Said Mr. Grewgious, with abundant offers of hospitality, which were as cordially declined as made. And how is your charge getting on over the way in the set that I had the pleasure of recommending to you as vacant and eligible? Mr. Crisparkle replied suitably. I am glad you approve of them, said Mr. Grewgious, because I entertain a sort of fancy for having him under my eye. As Mr. Grewgious had to turn his eye up considerably before he could see the chambers, the phrase was to be taken figuratively and not literally. And how did you leave Mr. Jasper, reverend sir? Said Mr. Grewgious. Mr. Crisparkle had left him pretty well. And where did you leave Mr. Jasper, reverend sir? Mr. Crisparkle had left him at Cloisterham. And when did you leave Mr. Jasper, reverend sir? That morning. Said Mr. Grewgious. He didn't say he was coming, perhaps. Coming where? Anywhere, for instance? Said Mr. Grewgious. No, because here he is, said Mr. Grewgious, who had asked all these questions, with his preoccupied glance directed out at window. And he don't look agreeable, does he? Mr. Crisparkle was craning towards the window, when Mr. Grewgious added, if you will kindly step round here behind me, in the gloom of the room, and will cast your eye at the second-floor landing window and over their house, I think you will hardly fail to see a slinking individual in whom I recognize our local friend. You are right, cried Mr. Crisparkle. Said Mr. Grewgious. Then he added, turning his face so abruptly that his head nearly came into collision with Mr. Crisparkle's, what should you say that our local friend was up to? The last passage he had been shown in the diary returned on Mr. Crisparkle's mind with the force of a strong recoil, and he asked Mr. Grewgious if he thought it possible that Neville was to be harassed by the keeping of a watch upon him. A watch? Repeated Mr. Grewgious musingly. Aye, which would not only of itself haunt and torture his life, said Mr. Crisparkle warmly, but would expose him to the torment of a perpetually reviving suspicion, whatever he may do, or wherever he may go. Aye, said Mr. Grewgious musingly still. Do I see him waiting for you? No doubt you do. Then would you have the goodness to excuse my getting up to see you out, and to go out to join him, and to go the way that you were going, and to take no notice of our local friend? Said Mr. Grewgious. I entertain a sort of fancy for having him under my eye tonight. Do you know? Mr. Crisparkle, with a significant nod, complied, and rejoining Neville, went away with him. They dined together and parted at the yet unfinished and undeveloped railway station. Mr. Crisparkle to get home, Neville to walk the streets, cross the bridges, make a wide round of the city in the friendly darkness, and tire himself out. It was midnight when he returned from his solitary expedition and climbed his staircase. The night was hot, and the windows of the staircase were all wide open. Coming to the top, it gave him a passing chill of surprise, there being no rooms but his up there, to find a stranger sitting on the window-sill, more after the manner of a venturesome glazier than an amateur ordinarily careful of his neck. In fact, so much more outside the window than inside, as to suggest the thought that he must have come up by the water-spout instead of the stairs. The stranger said nothing until Neville put his key in his door. Then, seeming to make sure of his identity from the action, he spoke. I beg your pardon, he said, coming from the window with a frank and smiling air and a prepossessing address. The beans. Neville was quite at a loss. Runners, said the visitor. Scarlet. Next door at the back. Oh, returned Neville. And the mignonette and wallflower. The same, said the visitor. Pray walk in. Thank you. Neville lighted his candles, and the visitor sat down. A handsome gentleman, with a young face, but with an older figure in its robustness and its breadth of shoulder, say a man of 28, or at the utmost 30, so extremely sunburnt that the contrast between his brown visage and the white forehead, shaded out of doors by his hat, and the glimpses of white throat below the neckerchief, would have been almost ludicrous but for his broad temples, bright blue eyes, clustering brown hair, and laughing Tess. I have noticed, said he, my name is Tartar. Neville inclined his head. I have noticed, excuse me, that you shut yourself up a good deal, and that you seem to like my garden aloft here. If you would like a little more of it, I could throw out a few lines and stays between my windows and yours, which the runners would take to directly. And I have some boxes, both of mignonette and wallflower, that I could shove on along the gutter with a bowthook I have by me to your windows, and draw back again when they wanted watering or gardening, and shove on again when they were ship-shape, so that they would cause you no trouble. I couldn't take this liberty without asking your permission, so I venture to ask it. Tartar, corresponding set, next door. You are very kind. Not at all. I ought to apologize for looking in so late, but having noticed, excuse me, that you generally walk out at night, I thought I should inconvenience you least by awaiting your return. I am always afraid of inconveniencing busy men, being an idle man. I should not have thought so from your appearance. No, I take it as a compliment. In fact, I was bred in the Royal Navy, and was first lieutenant when I quitted it. But an uncle disappointed in the service, leaving me his property on condition that I left the Navy. I accepted the fortune and resigned my commission. Lately, I presume? Well, I had had 12 or 15 years of knocking about first. I came here some 9 months before you. I had had one crop before you came. I chose this place because, having served last in a little corvette, I knew I should feel more at home where I had a constant opportunity of knocking my head against the ceiling. Besides, it would never do for a man who had been aboard ship from his boyhood to turn luxurious all at once. Besides, again, having been accustomed to a very short allowance of land all my life, I thought I'd feel my way to the command of a landed estate by beginning in boxes. Whimsically as this was said, there was a touch of merry earnestness in it that made it doubly whimsical. However, said the lieutenant, I have talked quite enough about myself. It is not my way, I hope. It has merely been to present myself to you naturally. If you will allow me to take the liberty I have described, it will be a charity, for it will give me something more to do, and you are not to suppose that it will entail any interruption or intrusion on you, for that is far from my intention. Neville replied that he was greatly obliged, and that he thankfully accepted the kind proposal. I am very glad to take your windows in tow, said the lieutenant, from what I have seen of you when I have been gardening at mine, and you have been looking on. I have thought you excuse me rather too studious and delicate. May I ask, is your health at all affected? I have undergone some mental distress, said Neville, confused, which has stood me in the stead of illness. Pardon me, said Mr. Tartar. With the greatest delicacy he shifted his ground to the windows again, and asked if he could look at one of them. On Neville's opening it, he immediately sprang out, as if he were going aloft with a whole watch in an emergency, and were setting a bright example. For heaven's sake, cried Neville, don't do that. Where are you going, Mr. Tartar? You'll be dashed to pieces. All well, said the lieutenant, coolly looking about him on the housetop. All taut and trim here. Those lines and stays shall be rigged before you turn out in the morning. May I take this short cut home, and say good night, Mr. Tartar? Urged Neville. Pray, it makes me giddy to see you. But Mr. Tartar, with a wave of his hand and the deftness of a cat, had already dipped through his scuttle of scarlet runners without breaking a leaf, and gone below. Mr. Grewgious, his bedroom window blind held aside with his hand, happened at the moment to have Neville's chambers under his eye for the last time that night. Fortunately his eye was on the front of the house, and not the back, where this remarkable appearance and disappearance may have broken his rest as a phenomenon. But Mr. Grewgious, seeing nothing there, not even a light in the windows, his gaze wandered from the windows to the stars, as if he would have read in them something that was hidden from him. Chapter 18. A settler in Cloisterham. At about this time a stranger appeared in Cloisterham, a white-haired personage, with black eyebrows. Being buttoned up in a tightish blue surtout, with a buff waistcoat and grey trousers, he had something of a military air, but he announced himself at the Crozier the Orthodox Hotel, where he put up with a portmanteau as an idle dog who lived upon his means, and he farther announced that he had a mind to take a lodging in the picturesque old city for a month or two, with a view of settling down there altogether. Both announcements were made in the coffee-room of the Crozier, to all whom it may or may not concern, by the stranger as he stood with his back to the empty fireplace, waiting for his fried sole, veal cutlet, and pint of sherry. And the waiter business, being chronically slack at the Crozier, represented all whom it may or may not concern, and absorbed the whole of the information. This gentleman's white head was unusually large, and his shock of white hair was unusually thick and ample. I suppose, waiter, he said, shaking his shock of hair, as a Newfoundland dog may shake his before sitting down to dinner, that a fair lodging for a single buffer may be found in these parts, eh? The waiter had no doubt of it. Something old, said the gentleman. Take my hat down for a moment from that peg, will you? No, I don't want it. Look into it. What do you see written there? The waiter read, Datchery. Now you know my name, said the gentleman. Dick Datchery. Hang it up again. I was saying something old is what I should prefer. Something odd and out of the way, something venerable, architectural, and inconvenient. We have a good choice of inconvenient lodgings in the town, sir, I think, replied the waiter, with modest confidence in its resources that way. Truly, I have no doubt that we could suit you that far, however particular you may be. But a architectural lodging, that seemed to trouble the waiter's head, and he shook it. Anything cathedraly, now, Mr. Dashery suggested. Mr. Tope, said the waiter, brightening, as he rubbed his chin with his hand, would be the likeliest party to inform in that line. Who is Mr. Tope? Inquired Dick Datchery. The waiter explained that he was the verger and that Mrs. Tope had truly once upon a time let lodgings herself or offered to let them, but that as nobody had ever taken them, Mrs. Tope's window bill, long a cloisteram institution, had disappeared, probably had tumbled down one day, and never been put up again. "I'll call on Mrs. Tope," said Mr. Thackeray, after dinner. So when he had done his dinner, he was duly directed to the spot, and sallied out for it. But the Crozier being an hotel of a most retiring disposition, and the waiter's directions being fatally precise, he soon became bewildered, and went boggling about and about the cathedral tower, whenever he could catch a glimpse of it, with a general impression on his mind that Mrs. Tope's was somewhere very near it, and that, like the children in the game of hot-boiled beans and very good butter, he was warm in his search when he saw the tower, and cold when he didn't see it. He was getting very cold truly, when he came upon a fragment of burial ground in which an unhappy sheep was grazing. Unhappy, because a hideous small boy was stoning it through the railings, and had already lamed it in one leg, and was much excited by the benevolent sportsmanlike purpose of breaking its other 3 legs, and bringing it down. "It im again," cried the boy, as the poor creature leaped, and made a dint in his wool. "Let him be," said Mr. Thackeray. "Don't you see you have lamed him?" "Yer lie," returned the sportsman. "'E went and lamed isself. I see 'im do it, and I give 'im a shy as a witty warning to 'im not to go a bruisin' 'is master's mutton any more. Come here." "I won't. I'll come when yer can catch me." "Stay there then, and show me which is Mr. Tope's." "Oh, can I stay here and show you which is Tope's when Tope's is t'other side the Kinfreederal, and over the crossings, and round ever so many comers?" "Stupid." "Yah, show me where it is, and I'll give you something. Come on, then." This brisk dialogue concluded, the boy led the way, and by stopped at some distance from an arched passage, pointing. "Looky over there. You see that there winder and door? That's Tope's." "Yer lie, it ain't. That's Jarsper's." "Truly," said Mr. Thackeray, with a second look of some interest. "Yes, and I ain't a-goin' no near I am, I tell yer." "Why not?" "'Cause I ain't a-goin' to be lifted off my legs and ave my braces bust and be choked, not if I knows it, and not by 'im. Wait till I set a jolly good flint a-flyin' at the back o' is jolly old Ed some day. Now look t'other side the harch, not the side where Jarsper's door is, t'other side." "I see. A little way in o' that side, there's a low door, down 2 steps. That's Tope's with his name on a hoful plate." "Good. See here," said Mr. Thackeray, producing a shilling. "You owe me half of this." "Yer lie. I don't owe yer nothing. I never seen yer. I tell ye you owe me half of this, because I have no 6pence in my pocket. So the next time you meet me you shall do something else for me, to pay me." "All right, give us old. What is your name, and where do you live?" "Deputy, Traveller's Twopenny, Cross the Green." The boy instantly darted off with the shilling, lest Mr. Thackeray should repent, but stopped at a safe distance, on the happy chance of his being uneasy in his mind about it, to goad him with a demon dance expressive of its irreversibility. Mr. Thackeray, taking off his hat to give that shock of white hair of his another shake, seemed quite resigned, and betook himself where he had been directed. Mr. Tope's official dwelling, communicating by an upper stair with Mr. Jasper's there for Mrs. Tope's attendance on that gentleman was of very modest proportions and partook of the character of a cool dungeon. Its ancient walls were massive, and its rooms rather seemed to have been dug out of them than to have been designed beforehand with any reference to them. The main door opened at once on a chamber of no describable shape, with a groined roof, which in its turn opened on another chamber of no describable shape, with another groined roof, their windows small and in the thickness of the walls. These 2 chambers, close as to their atmosphere and swarthy as to their illumination by natural light, were the apartments which Mrs. Tope had so long offered to an unappreciative city. Mr. Thackeray, however, was more appreciative. He found that if he sat with the main door open he would enjoy the passing society of all comers to and fro by the gateway, and would have light enough. He found that if Mr. and Mrs. Tope, living overhead, used for their own egress and ingress a little side stair that came plump into the precincts by a door opening outward, to the surprise and inconvenience of a limited public of pedestrians in a narrow way, he would be alone, as in a separate residence. He found the rent moderate, and everything as quaintly inconvenient as he could desire. He agreed, therefore, to take the lodging then and there, and money down, possession to be had next evening, on condition that reference was permitted him to Mr. Jasper as occupying the gatehouse, of which on the other side of the gateway, the verger's hole in the wall was an appanage or subsidiary part. The poor dear gentleman was very solitary and very sad, Mrs. Tope said, but she had no doubt he would speak for her. Perhaps Mr. Datchery had heard something of what had occurred there last winter. Mr. Datchery had as confused a knowledge of the event in question, on trying to recall it, as he well could have. He begged Mrs. Tope's pardon when she found it incumbent on her to correct him in every detail of his summary of the facts, but pleaded that he was merely a single buffer getting through life upon his means as idly as he could, and that so many people were so constantly making away with so many other people, as to render it difficult for a buffer of an easy temper to preserve the circumstances of the several cases unmixed in his mind. Mr. Jasper proving willing to speak for Mrs. Tope, Mr. Datchery, who had sent up his card, was invited to ascend the postern staircase. The mayor was there, Mr. Tope said, but he was not to be regarded in the light of company, as he and Mr. Jasper were great friends. I beg pardon, said Mr. Datchery, making a leg with his hat under his arm, as he addressed himself equally to both gentlemen, a selfish precaution on my part, and not personally interesting to anybody but myself, but as a buffer living on his means, and having an idea of doing it in this lovely place in peace and quiet, for remaining span of life. I beg to ask if the Tope family are quite respectable. Mr. Jasper could answer for that without the slightest hesitation. That is enough, sir, said Mr. Datchery. My friend the mayor, added Mr. Jasper, presenting Mr. Datchery with a courtly motion of his hand towards that potentate, whose recommendation is actually much more important to a stranger than that of an obscure person like myself, will testify in their behalf, I am sure. The worshipful the mayor, said Mr. Datchery, with a low bow, places me under an infinite obligation. Very good people, sir. Mr. and Mrs. Tope, said Mr. Sapsea, with condescension. Very good opinions. Very well behaved. Very respectful. Much approved by the dean and chapter. The worshipful the mayor gives them a character, said Mr. Datchery, of which they may truly be proud. I would ask his honor if I may be permitted whether there are not many objects of great interest in the city which is under his beneficent sway. We are, sir, returned Mr. Sapsea, an ancient city and an ecclesiastical city. We are a constitutional city, as it becomes such a city to be, and we uphold and maintain our glorious privileges. His honor, said Mr. Datchery, bowing, inspires me with a desire to know more of the city, and confirms me in my inclination to end my days in the city. Retired from the army, sir, suggested Mr. Sapsea. His honor the mayor does me too much credit, returned Mr. Datchery. Navy, sir, suggested Mr. Sapsea. Again, repeated Mr. Datchery. His honor the mayor does me too much credit. Diplomacy is a fine profession, said Mr. Sapsea as a general remark. There, I confess, his honor the mayor is too many for me, said Mr. Datchery, with an ingenious smile and bow. Evening a diplomatic bird must fall to such a gun. Now this was very soothing. Here was a gentleman of a great, not to say a grand, address, accustomed to rank and dignity, really setting a fine example how to behave to a mayor. There was something in that third-person style of being spoken to that Mr. Sapsea found particularly recognizant of his merits and position. "But I crave pardon," said Mr. Datchery. "His honor the mayor will bear with me, if for a moment I have been deluded into occupying his time, and have forgotten the humble claims upon my own of my hotel, the Crozier." "Not at all, sir," said Mr. Sapsea. "I am returning home, and if you would like to take the exterior of our cathedral in your way, I shall be glad to point it out." "His honor the mayor," said Mr. Datchery, "is more than kind and gracious." As Mr. Datchery, when he had made his acknowledgments to Mr. Jasper, could not be induced to go out of the room before the worshipful led the way downstairs, Mr. Datchery following with his hat under his arm, and his shock of white hair streaming in the evening breeze. "May I ask his honor," said Mr. Datchery, "whether that gentleman we have just left is the gentleman of whom I have heard in the neighborhood as being much afflicted by the loss of a nephew, and concentrating his life on avenging the loss?" "That is the gentleman, John Jasper, sir." "Would his honor allow me to inquire whether there are strong suspicions of any one?" "More than suspicions, sir," returned Mr. Sapsea, "all but certainties." "Only think now," cried Mr. Datchery. "But proof, sir, proof must be built up stone by stone," said the mayor. "As I say, the end crowns the work. It is not enough that justice should be morally certain, she must be immorally certain, legally, that is." "His honor," said Mr. Datchery, "reminds me of the nature of the law." "Immoral, how true!" "As I say, sir," pompously went on the mayor, "the arm of the law is a strong arm and a long arm. That is the way I put it. A strong arm and a long arm. How forcible, and yet, again, how true," murmured Mr. Datchery. "And without betraying what I call the secrets of the prison house," said Mr. Sapsea. "The secrets of the prison house is the term I used on the bench." "And what other term than his honors would express it?" said Mr. Datchery. "Without, I say, betraying them, I predict to you, knowing the iron will of the gentleman we have just left, I take the bold step of calling it iron, on account of its strength, that in this case the long arm will reach, and the strong arm will strike. This is our cathedral, sir. The best judges are pleased to admire it, and the best among our townsmen own to being a little vain of it." All this time Mr. Datchery had walked with his hat under his arm, and his white hair streaming. He had an odd momentary appearance upon him of having forgotten his hat, when Mr. Sapsea now touched it, and he clapped his hand up to his head as if with some vague expectation of finding another hat upon it. "Pray be covered, sir," entreated Mr. Sapsea, magnificently plying. "I shall not mind it, I assure you." "His honor is very good, but I do it for coolness," said Mr. Datchery. Then Mr. Datchery admired the cathedral, and Mr. Sapsea pointed it out as if he himself had invented and built it. There were a few details truly of which he did not approve, but those he glossed over, as if the workman had made mistakes in his absence. The cathedral disposed of, he led the way by the churchyard, and stopped to extol the beauty of the evening, by chance, in the immediate vicinity of Mrs. Sapsea's epitaph. "And by the by," said Mr. Sapsea, appearing to descend from an elevation to remember it all of a sudden, like Apollo shooting down from Olympus to pick up his forgotten lyre, "that is one of our small lions. The partiality of our people has made it so, and strangers have been seen taking a copy of it now and then. I am not a judge of it myself, for it is a little work of my own, but it was troublesome to turn, sir, I may say, difficult to turn with elegance." Mr. Datchery became so ecstatic over Mr. Sapsea's composition that, in spite of his intention to end his days in Cloisterham, and therefore his probably having in reserve many opportunities of copying it, he would have transcribed it into his pocket-book on the spot, but for the slouching towards them of its material producer and perpetuator, Durdles, whom Mr. Sapsea hailed, not sorry to show him a bright example of behavior to superiors. "Ah, Durdles, this is the mason, sir, one of our Cloisterham worthies. Everybody here knows Durdles." "Mr. Datchery, Durdles a gentleman who is going to settle here." I wouldn't do it if I was him, growled Durdles. We're a heavy lot. You surely don't speak for yourself, Mr. Durdles, returned Mr. Datchery, any more than for his honor. Who's his honor? Demanded Durdles. His honor the mayor. I never was brought afore him, said Durdles, with anything but the look of a loyal subject of the mayoralty, and it'll be time enough for me to honor him when I am. Until which, and when, and where, Mr. Sapsea is his name, England is his nation, Cloisterham's his dwelling place, auctioneer's his occupation. Here, deputy preceded by a flying oyster shell appeared upon the scene, and requested to have the sum of threepence instantly chucked to him by Mr. Durdles, whom he had been vainly seeking up and down as lawful wages overdue, while that gentleman, with his bundle under his arm, slowly found and counted out the money. Mr. Sapsea informed the new settler of Durdles's habits, pursuits, abode, and reputation. I suppose a curious stranger may come to see you and your works, Mr. Durdles, at any odd time? Said Mr. Datchery. Upon that, any gentleman is welcome to come and see me any evening if he brings liquor for two with him, returned Durdles, with a penny between his tests and certain halfpence in his hands, or if he likes to make it twice too, he'll be doubly welcome. I shall come. Master Deputy, what do you owe me? A job. Mind you pay me honestly with the job of showing me Mr. Durdles's house when I want to go there. Deputy, with a piercing broadside of whistle through the whole gap in his mouth, as a receipt in full for all arrears, vanished. The worshipful and the worshipper then passed on together until they parted, with many ceremonies, at the worshipful's door. Evening then the worshipper carried his hat under his arm, and gave his streaming white hair to the breeze. Said Mr. Chapter 19. Shadow on the Sundial. Again Miss Twinkleton has delivered her valedictory address, with the accompaniments of white wine and pound cake, and again the young ladies have departed to their several homes. Helena Landless has left the nun's house to attend her brother's fortunes, and pretty Rosa is alone. Cloisterham is so bright and sunny in these summer days that the cathedral and the monastery ruins show as if their strong walls were transparent. A soft glow seems to shine from within them rather than upon them from without. Such is their mellowness as they look forth on the hot cornfields and the smoking roads that distantly wind among them. The Cloisterham gardens blush with ripening fruit. Time was when travel-stained pilgrims rode in clattering parties through the city's welcome shades. Time is when wayfarers, leading a gypsy life between haymaking time and harvest, and looking as if they were just made of the dust of the earth, so very dusty are they, lounge about on cool doorsteps, trying to mend their amendable shoes, or giving them to the city kennels as a hopeless job, and seeking others in the bundles that they carry, along with their yet unused sickles swathed in bands of straw. At all the more public pumps there is much cooling of bare feet, together with much bubbling and gurgling of drinking with hand to spout on the part of these Bedouins. The Cloisterham police meanwhile looking askant from their beats with suspicion, and manifest impatience that the intruders should depart from within the civic bounds, and once more fry themselves on the simmering high roads. On the afternoon of such a day, when the last cathedral service is done, and when that side of the high street on which the nun's house stands is in grateful shade, save where its quaint old garden opens to the west between the boughs of trees, a servant informs Rosa, to her terror, that Mr. Jasper desires to see her. If he had chosen his time for finding her at a disadvantage, he could have done no better. Perhaps he has chosen it. Helena Landless is gone. Mrs. Tisher is absent on leave. Miss Twinkleton in her amateur state of existence has contributed herself and a veal pie to a picnic. Oh, why, did you say I was at home? Cried Rosa helplessly. The maid replies that Mr. Jasper never asked the question, that he said he knew she was at home, and begged she may be told that he asked to see her. What shall I do? What shall I do? Thinks Rosa, clasping her hands. Possessed by a kind of desperation, she adds in the next breath that she will come to Mr. Jasper in the garden. She shudders at the thought of being shut up with him in the house. but many of its windows command the garden, and she can be seen as well as heard there, and can shriek in the free air and run away. Such is the wild idea that flutters through her mind. She has never seen him since the fatal night, except when she was questioned before the mayor, and then he was present in gloomy watchfulness, as representing his lost nephew and burning to avenge him. She hangs her garden hat on her arm and goes out. The moment she sees him from the porch, leaning on the sundial, the old horrible feeling of being compelled by him asserts its hold upon her. She feels that she would evening then go back, but that he draws her feet towards him. She cannot resist and sits down, with her head bent on the garden seat beside the sundial. She cannot look up at him for abhorrence, but she has perceived that he is dressed in deep mourning. So is she. It was not so at first, but the lost has long been given up and mourned for as dead. He would begin by touching her hand. She feels the intention and draws her hand back. His eyes are then fixed upon her. She knows, though her own see nothing but the grass. I have been waiting, he begins, for some time, to be summoned back to my duty near you. After several times forming her lips, which she knows he is closely watching, into the shape of some other hesitating reply, and then into none, she answers, "Duty, sir. The duty of teaching you, serving you as your faithful music master. I have left off that study. Not left off, I think. Discontinued. I was told by your guardian that you discontinued it under the shock that we have all felt so acutely. When will you resume?" "Never, sir. Never. You could have done no more if you had loved my dear boy." "I did love him," cried Rosa, with a flash of anger. "Yes, but not quite in the right way, shall I say? Not in the intended and expected way. Much as my dear boy was, unhappily, too self-conscious and self-satisfied, I'll draw no parallel between him and you in that respect to love as he should have loved, or as any one in his place would have loved, must have loved." She sits in the same still attitude, but shrinking a little more. "Then, to be told that you discontinued your study with me was to be politely told that you abandoned it altogether," he suggested. "Yes," says Rosa, with sudden spirit, "the politeness was my guardian's, not mine. I told him that I was resolved to leave off, and that I was determined to stand by my resolution." "And you still are." "I still am, sir, and I beg not to be questioned any more about it. At all events, I will not answer any more. I have that in my power." She is so conscious of his looking at her with a gloating admiration of the touch of anger on her, and the fire and animation it brings with it. That evening, as her spirit rises, it falls again, and she struggles with a sense of shame, affront, and fear, much as she did that night at the piano. "I will not question you any more, since you object to it so much. I will confess." "I do not wish to hear you, sir," cries Rosa, rising. This time he does touch her with his outstretched hand. In shrinking from it, she shrinks into her seat again. "We must sometimes act in opposition to our wishes," he tells her in a low voice. "You must do so now, or do more harm to others than you can ever set right." "What harm?" Soon. You question me, you see, and surely that's not fair when you forbid me to question you. Nevertheless, I will answer the question soon. Dearest Rosa, charming Rosa," she starts up again. This time he does not touch her, but his face looks so wicked and menacing, as he stands leaning against the sundial setting, as it were, his black mark upon the very face of day, that her flight is arrested by horror as she looks at him. "I do not forget how many windows command a view of us," he says, glancing towards them. "I will not touch you again. I will come no nearer to you than I am. Sit down, and there will be no mighty wonder in your music master's leaning idly against a pedestal and speaking with you, remembering all that has happened, and our shares in it. Sit down, my beloved." She would have gone once more, was all but gone, and once more his face, darkly threatening what would follow if she went, has stopped her, looking at him with the expression of the instant frozen on her face. She sits down on the seat again. "Rosa, evening when my dear boy was affianced to you, I loved you madly. Evening when I thought his happiness in having you for his wife was certain, I loved you madly. evening when I strove to make him more ardently devoted to you. I loved you madly, evening when he gave me the picture of your lovely face so carelessly traduced by him, which I feigned to hang always in my sight for his sake, but worshipped in torment for years. I loved you madly, in the distasteful work of the day, in the wakeful misery of the night, girded by sordid realities, or wandering through paradises and hells of visions into which I rushed, carrying your image in my arms. I loved you madly. If anything could make his words more hideous to her than they are in themselves, it would be the contrast between the violence of his look and delivery and the composure of his assumed attitude. I endured it all in silence. So long as you were his, or so long as I supposed you to be his, I hid my secret loyally. Did I not? This lie, so gross, while the mere words in which it is told are so true, is more than Rosa can endure. She answers with kindling indignation, "You were as false throughout, sir, as you are now. You were false to him, daily and hourly. You know that you made my life unhappy by your pursuit of me. You know that you made me afraid to open his generous eyes, and that you forced me, for his own trusting, good sake, to keep the truth from him, that you were a bad man." His preservation of his easy attitude rendering his working features and his convulsive hands absolutely diabolical, he returns, with a fierce extreme of admiration. "How beautiful you are! You are more beautiful in anger than in repose. I don't ask you for your love. Give me yourself and your hatred. Give me yourself and that pretty rage. Give me yourself and that enchanting scorn. It will be enough for me." Impatient tears rise to the eyes of the trembling little beauty, and her face flames. But as she again rises to leave him in indignation and seek protection within the house, he stretches out his hand towards the porch, as though he invited her to enter it. "I told you, you rare charmer, you sweet witch, that you must stay and hear me, or do more harm than can ever be undone. You asked me what harm. Stay, and I will tell you. Go, and I will do it." Again Rosa quails before his threatening face, though innocent of its meaning, and she remains. Her panting breathing comes and goes as if it would choke her, but with a repressive hand upon her bosom, she remains. "I have made my confession that my love is mad. It is so mad, that had the ties between me and my dear lost boy been one silken thread less strong, I may have swept evening him from your side, when you favored him." A film comes over the eyes she raises for an instant, as though he had turned her faint. "Evening him," he repeats. "Yes, evening him. Rosa, you see me and you hear me. Judge for yourself whether any other admirer shall love you and live, whose life is in my hand." "What do you mean, sir?" "I mean to show you how mad my love is." It was hawked through the late inquiries by Mr. Crisparkle that young Landless had confessed to him that he was a rival of my lost boy. That is an inexpiable offense in my eyes. The same Mr. Crisparkle knows under my hand that I have devoted myself to the murder's discovery and destruction, be he whom he may, and that I determined to discuss the mystery with no one until I should hold the clue in which to entangle the murderer as in a net. I have since worked patiently to wind and wind it round him, and it is slowly winding as I speak. Your belief, if you believe in the criminality of Mr. Landless, is not Mr. Crisparkle's belief, and he is a good man, Rosa retorts. My belief is my own, and I reserve it. Worshipped of my soul, circumstances may accumulate so strongly evening against an innocent man, that directed, sharpened, and pointed, they may slay him. One wanting link discovered by perseverance against a guilty man proves his guilt, however slight its evidence before, and he dies. Young Landless stands in deadly peril either way. If you really suppose, Rosa pleads with him, turning paler, that I favor Mr. Landless, or that Mr. Landless has ever in any way addressed himself to me, you are wrong. He puts that from him with a sliding action of his hand and a curled lip. I was going to show you how madly I love you, more madly now than ever, for I am willing to renounce the second object that has arisen in my life to divide it with you, and henceforth to have no object in existence but you only. Miss Landless has become your bosom friend. You care for her peace of mind? I love her dearly. You care for her good name? I have said, sir, I love her dearly. I am unconsciously, he observes with a smile, as he folds his hands upon the sundial and leans his chin upon them, so that his talk would seem from the windows faces occasionally come and go there to be of the airiest and playfulest. I am unconsciously giving offense by questioning again. I will simply make statements, therefore, and not put questions. You do care for your bosom friend's good name, and you do care for her peace of mind. Then remove the shadow of the gallows from her, dear one. You dare propose to me too. Darling, I dare propose to you. Stop there. If it be bad to idolize you, I am the worst of men. If it be good, I am the best. My love for you is above all other love, and my truth to you is above all other truth. Let me have hope and favor, and I am a forsworn man for your sake. Rosa puts her hands to her temples, and, pushing back her hair, looks wildly and abhorrently at him, as though she were trying to piece together what it is his deep purpose to present to her only in fragments. Reckon up nothing at this moment, angel, but the sacrifices that I lay at those dear feet, which I could fall down among the vilest ashes and kiss and put upon my head as a poor savage may. There is my fidelity to my dear boy after death. Tread upon it, with an action of his hands as though he cast down something precious. There is the inexpiable offense against my adoration of you. Spurn it, with a similar action. There are my labors in the cause of a just vengeance for 6 toiling months. Crush them, with another repetition of the action. There is my past and my present wasted life. There is the desolation of my heart and my soul. There is my peace. There is my despair. Stamp them into the dust, so that you take me, or at evening mortally hating me. The frightful vehemence of the man, now reaching its full height, so additionally terrifies her as to break the spell that has held her to the spot. She swiftly moves towards the porch, but in an instant he is at her side, and speaking in her ear. Rosa, I am self-repressed again. I am walking calmly beside you to the house. I shall wait for some encouragement and hope. I shall not strike too soon. Give me a sign that you attend to me. She slightly and constrainedly moves her hand. Not a word of this to any one, or it will bring down the blow, as certainly as night follows day. Another sign that you attend to me. She moves her hand once more. I love you, love you, love you. If you were to cast me off now, but you will not, you would never be rid of me. No one should come between us. I would pursue you to the death. The handmaid coming out to open the gate for him, he quietly pulls off his hat as a parting salute, and goes away with no greater show of agitation than is visible in the effigy of Mr. Sapsea's father opposite. Rosa faints in going upstairs, and is carefully carried to her room, and laid down on her bed. Chapter 20. A Flight. Rosa no sooner came to herself than the whole of the late interview was before her. It evening seemed as if it had pursued her into her insensibility, and she had not had a moment's unconsciousness of it. What to do, she was at a frightened loss to know. The only one clear thought in her mind was that she must fly from this terrible man. But where could she take refuge, and how could she go? She had never breathed her dread of him to any one but Helena. If she went to Helena, and told her what had passed, that very act may bring down the irreparable mischief that he threatened he had the power, and that she knew he had the will, to do. The more fearful he appeared to her excited memory and imagination, the more alarming her responsibility appeared, seeing that a slight mistake on her part, either in action or delay, may let his malevolence loose on Helena's brother. Rosa's mind throughout the last 6 months had been stormily confused. A half-formed, wholly unexpressed suspicion tossed in it, now heaving itself up, and now sinking into the deep, now gaining palpability, and now losing it. Jasper's self-absorption in his nephew when he was alive, and his unceasing pursuit of the inquiry how he came by his death, if he were dead, were themes so rife in the place that no one appeared able to suspect the possibility of foul play at his hands. She had asked herself the question, am I so wicked in my thoughts as to conceive a wickedness that others cannot imagine? Then she had considered, Did the suspicion come of her previous recoiling from him before the fact? And if so, was not that a proof of its baselessness? Then she had reflected. What motive could he have, according to my accusation? She was ashamed to answer in her mind. The motive of gaining me, and covered her face, as if the lightest shadow of the idea of founding murder on such an idle vanity were a crime almost as great. She ran over in her mind again all that he had said by the sundial in the garden. He had persisted in treating the disappearance as murder, consistently with his whole public course, since the finding of the watch and shirt bin. If he were afraid of the crime being traced out, would he not rather encourage the idea of a voluntary disappearance? He had evening declared that if the ties between him and his nephew had been less strong, he may have swept, evening him, away from her side. Was that like his having really done so? He had spoken of laying his 6 months' labors in the cause of a just vengeance at her feet. Would he have done that, with that violence of passion, if they were a pretense? Would he have ranged them with his desolate heart and soul, his wasted life, his peace and his despair? The very first sacrifice that he represented himself as making for her was his fidelity to his dear boy after death. Surely these facts were strong against a fancy that scarcely dared to hint itself. And yet he was so terrible a man. In short, the poor girl, for what could she know of the criminal intellect, which its own professed students perpetually misread, because they persist in trying to reconcile it with the average intellect of average men, instead of identifying it as a horrible wonder apart, could get by no road to any other conclusion than that he was a terrible man, and must be fled from. She had been Helena's stay and comfort during the whole time. She had constantly assured her of her full belief in her brother's innocence, and of her sympathy with him in his misery, but she had never seen him since the disappearance, nor had Helena ever spoken one word of his avowal to Mr. Crisparkle in regard of Rosa, though as a part of the interest of the case it was well known far and wide. He was Helena's unfortunate brother to her, and nothing more. The assurance she had given her odious suitor was strictly true, though it would have been better, she considered now, if she could have restrained herself from so giving it. Afraid of him as the bright and delicate little creature was, her spirit swelled at the thought of his knowing it from her own lips. But where was she to go? Anywhere beyond his reach was no reply to the question. Somewhere must be thought of. She determined to go to her guardian, and to go immediately. The feeling she had imparted to Helena on the night of their first confidence was so strong upon her, the feeling of not being safe from him, and of the solid walls of the old convent being powerless to keep out his ghostly following of her, that no reasoning of her own could calm her terrors. The fascination of repulsion had been upon her so long, and now culminated so darkly, that she felt as if he had power to bind her by a spell. Glancing out at window, evening now, as she rose to dress, the sight of the sundial on which he had leaned when he declared himself, turned her cold, and made her shrink from it, as though he had invested it with some awful quality from his own nature. She wrote a hurried note to Miss Twinkleton, saying that she had sudden reason for wishing to see her guardian promptly, and had gone to him, also, entreating the good lady not to be uneasy, for all was well with her. She hurried a few quite useless articles into a very little bag, left the note in a conspicuous place, and went out, softly closing the gate after her. It was the first time she had ever been evening in Cloisterham High Street alone, but knowing all its ways and windings very well, she hurried straight to the corner from which the omnibus departed. It was, at that very moment, going off. "Stop and take me, if you please, Joe. I am obliged to go to London." In less than another minute she was on her road to the railway, under Joe's protection. Joe waited on her when she got there, put her safely into the railway carriage, and handed in the very little bag after her, as though it were some enormous trunk, hundredweights heavy, which she must on no account endeavor to lift. "Can you go round when you get back, and tell Miss Twinkleton that you saw me safely off, Joe?" "It shall be done, miss. With my love, please, Joe." "Yes, miss, and I wouldn't mind having it myself." But Joe did not articulate the last clause, only thought it. Now, that she was whirling away for London in real earnest, Rosa was at leisure to resume the thoughts which her personal hurry had checked. The indignant thought that his declaration of love soiled her, that she could only be cleansed from the stain of its impurity by appealing to the honest and true, supported her for a time against her fears, and confirmed her in her hasty resolution. But as the evening grew darker and darker, and the great city impended nearer and nearer, the doubts usual in such cases began to arise. Whether this was not a wild proceeding, after all, how Mr. Grewgious may regard it, whether she should find him at the journey's end, how she would act if he were absent, what may become of her, alone, in a place so strange and crowded, how if she had but waited and taken counsel first, whether, if she could now go back, she would not do it thankfully. A multitude of such uneasy speculations disturbed her, more and more as they accumulated. At length the train came into London over the housetops, and down below lay the gritty streets with their yet unneeded lamps aglow on a hot, light, summer night. Hiram Grewgious, Esquire, Staple Inn, London. This was all Rosa knew of her destination, but it was enough to send her rattling away again in a cab, through deserts of gritty streets, where many people crowded at the corner of courts and byways to get some air, and where many other people walked with a miserably monotonous noise of shuffling of feet on hot paving stones, and where all the people and all their surroundings were so gritty and so shabby. There was music playing here and there, but it did not enliven the case. No barrel organ mended the matter, and no big drum beat dull care away. Like the chapel bells that were also going here and there, they only seemed to evoke echoes from brick surfaces and dust from everything. As to the flat wind instruments, they seemed to have cracked their hearts and souls in pining for the country. Her jingling conveyance stopped at last at a fast-closed gateway, which appeared to belong to somebody who had gone to bed very early, and was much afraid of housebreakers. Rosa, discharging her conveyance, timidly knocked at this gateway, and was let in, very little bag and all, by a watchman. "Does Mr. Grewgious live here?" "Mr. Grewgious lives there, miss," said the watchman, pointing further in. So Rosa went further in, and, when the clocks were striking 10, stood on P.J. T.'s doorsteps, wondering what P.J. T had done with his street door. Guided by the painted name of Mr. Grewgious, she went upstairs and softly tapped and tapped several times, but no one answering, and Mr. Grewgious's door handle yielding to her touch, she went in, and saw her guardian sitting on a window seat at an open window, with a shaded lamp placed far from him on a table in a corner. Rosa drew nearer to him in the twilight of the room. He saw her, and he said, in an undertone, "Good heaven!" Rosa fell upon his neck, with tears, and then he said, returning her embrace, my child, I thought you were your mother. But what," he added, soothingly, "has happened? My dear, what has brought you here? Who has brought you here?" "No one. I came alone." "Lord bless me!" ejaculated Mr. Grewgious. "Came alone? Why didn't you write to me to come and fetch you?" "I had no time. I took a sudden resolution." Poor Eddie. Ah, poor fellow, poor fellow. His uncle has made love to me. I cannot bear it," said Rosa, at once with a burst of tears, and a stamp of her little foot. "I shudder with horror of him, and I have come to you to protect me and all of us from him, if you will." "I will," cried Mr. Grewgious with a sudden rush of amazing energy. "Damn him! Confound his politics! Frustrate his knavish tricks! On you his hopes to fix! Damn him again!" After this most extraordinary outburst, Mr. Grewgious, quite beside himself, plunged about the room, to all appearance undecided whether he was in a fit of loyal enthusiasm or combative denunciation. He stopped and said, wiping his face, "I beg your pardon, my dear, but you will be glad to know I feel better. Tell me no more just now, or I may do it again. You must be refreshed and cheered. What did you take last? Was it breakfast, lunch, dinner, tea, or supper? And what will you take next? Shall it be breakfast, lunch, dinner, tea, or supper?" The respectful tenderness with which, on one knee before her, he helped her to remove her hat, and disentangle her pretty hair from it, was quite a chivalrous sight. Yet who, knowing him only on the surface, would have expected chivalry, and of the true sort, too, not the spurious, from Mr. Grewgious. Your rest too must be provided for, he went on, and you shall have the prettiest chamber in Furnival's. Your toilet must be provided for, and you shall have everything that an unlimited head chambermaid, by which expression I mean a head chambermaid not limited as to outlay, can procure. Is that a bag? He looked hard at it. Sooth to say, it required hard looking at to be seen at all in a dimly lighted room. And is it your property, my dear? Yes, sir. I brought it with me. It is not an extensive bag, said Mr. Grewgious, candidly, though admirably calculated to contain a day's provision for a canary bird. Perhaps you brought a canary bird? Rosa smiled and shook her head. If you had, he should have been made welcome, said Mr. Grewgious, and I think he would have been pleased to be hung upon a nail outside and pit himself against our stable sparrows, whose execution must be admitted to be not quite equal to their intention, which is the case with so many of us. You didn't say what meal, my dear. Have a nice jumble of all meals. Rosa thanked him, but said she could only take a cup of tea. Mr. Grewgious, after several times running out and in again to mention such supplementary items as marmalade, eggs, watercresses, salted fish, and frizzled ham, ran across to Furnival's without his hat to give his various directions, and soon afterwards they were realized in practice, and the board was spread. Lord bless my soul, cried Mr. Grewgious, putting the lamp upon it, and taking his seat opposite Rosa. What a new sensation for a poor old angular bachelor, to be sure. Rosa's expressive little eyebrows asked him what he meant. The sensation of having a sweet young presence in the place, that whitewashes it, paints it, papers it, decorates it with gilding, and makes it glorious, said Mr. Grewgious. Ah me, as there was something mournful in his sigh. Rosa, in touching him with her teacup, ventured to touch him with her small hand too. Thank you, my dear, said Mr. Grewgious. Ahem, let's talk. Do you always live here, sir? Asked Rosa. Yes, my dear. And always alone? Always alone, except that I have daily company in a gentleman by the name of Bazzard, my clerk. He doesn't live here. No, he goes his way after office hours. In fact, he is off duty here altogether just at present, and a firm downstairs with which I have business relations lend me a substitute. But it would be extremely difficult to replace Mr. Bassard. He must be very fond of you, said Rosa. He bears up against it with commendable fortitude if he is, returned Mr. Grewgious after considering the matter. But I doubt if he is. Not particularly so. You see, he is discontented, poor fellow. Why isn't he contented? Was the natural inquiry. Misplaced, said Mr. Grewgious with great mystery. Rosa's eyebrows resumed their inquisitive and perplexed expression. So misplaced, Mr. Grewgious went on, that I feel constantly apologetic towards him, and he feels, though he doesn't mention it, that I have reason to be. Mr. Grewgious had by this time grown so very mysterious that Rosa did not know how to go on. While she was thinking about it, Mr. Grewgious suddenly jerked out of himself for the second time. Let's talk. We were speaking of Mr. Bassard. It's a secret, and moreover it is Mr. Bassard's secret, but the sweet presence at my table makes me so unusually expansive that I feel I must impart it in inviolable confidence. What do you think Mr. Bassard has done? Oh dear, cried Rosa, drawing her chair a little nearer, and her mind reverting to Jasper. Nothing dreadful, I hope. He has written a play, said Mr. Grewgious in a solemn whisper. A tragedy. Rosa seemed much relieved. And nobody, pursued Mr. Grewgious in the same tone, will hear, on any account whatever, of bringing it out. Rosa looked reflective, and nodded her head slowly, as who should say, such things are, and why are they? Now, you know, said Mr. Grewgious, I couldn't write a play. Not a bad one, sir, said Rosa, innocently, with her eyebrows again in action. No, if I was under sentence of decapitation, and was about to be instantly decapitated, and an express arrived with a pardon for the condemned convict Grewgious if he wrote a play, I should be under the necessity of resuming the block, and begging the executioner to proceed to extremities, meaning, said Mr. Grewgious, passing his hand under his chin, the singular number, and this extremity. Rosa appeared to consider what she would do if the awkward supposititious case were hers. Consequently, said Mr. Grewgious, Mr. Bazard would have a sense of my inferiority to himself under any circumstances, but when I am his master, you know, the case is greatly aggravated. Mr. Grewgious shook his head seriously, as if he felt the offense to be a little too much, though of his own committing. How came you to be his master, sir? Asked Rosa. A question that naturally follows, said Mr. Grewgious. Let's talk. Mr. Bazard's father, being a Norfolk farmer, would have furiously laid about him with a flail, a pitchfork, and every agricultural implement available for assaulting purposes on the slightest hint of his son's having written a play. So the son, bringing to me the father's rent which I receive, imparted his secret, and pointed out that he was determined to pursue his genius, and that it would put him in peril of starvation, and that he was not formed for it. For pursuing his genius, sir? No, my dear, said Mr. Grewgious, for starvation. It was impossible to deny the position that Mr. Bazard was not formed to be starved, and Mr. Bazard then pointed out that it was desirable that I should stand between him and a fate so perfectly unsuited to his formation. In that way Mr. Bazard became my clerk, and he feels it very much. I am glad he is grateful, said Rosa. I didn't quite mean that, my dear. I mean that he feels the degradation. There are some other geniuses that Mr. Bazard has become acquainted with, who have also written tragedies, which likewise nobody will on any account whatever hear of bringing out, and these choice spirits dedicate their plays to one another in a highly panegyrical manner. Mr. Bazard has been the subject of one of these dedications. Now, you know, I never had a play dedicated to me. Rosa looked at him as if she would have liked him to be the recipient of 1,000 dedications, which again, naturally, rubs against the grain of Mr. Bazard, said Mr. Grewgious. He is very short with me sometimes, and then I feel that he is meditating. This blockhead is my master, a fellow who couldn't write a tragedy on pain of death, and who will never have one dedicated to him with the most complimentary congratulations on the high position he has taken in the eyes of posterity. Very trying, very trying. However, in giving him directions, I reflect beforehand. Perhaps he may not like this, or he may take it ill if I asked that, and so we get on very well truly, better than I could have expected. Is the tragedy named, sir? Asked Rosa. Strictly between ourselves, answered Mr. Grewgious. It has a dreadfully appropriate name. It is called The Thorn of Anxiety. But Mr. Bazard hopes, and I hope, that it will come out at last. It was not hard to divine that Mr. Grewgious had related the Bazard history thus fully, at least quite as much for the recreation of his ward's mind from the subject that had driven her there, as for the gratification of his own tendency to be social and communicative. And now, my dear, he said at this point, if you are not too tired to tell me more of what passed today, but only if you feel quite able, I should be glad to hear it. I may digest it the better if I sleep on it tonight. Rosa, composed now, gave him a faithful account of the interview. Mr. Grewgious often smoothed his head while it was in progress, and begged to be told a second time those parts which bore on Helena and Neville. When Rosa had finished, he sat grave, silent, and meditative for a while. Clearly narrated, was his only remark at last, and, I hope, clearly put away here, smoothing his head again. See, my dear, taking her to the open window, where they live, the dark windows over there. I may go to Helena tomorrow? Asked Rosa. I should like to sleep on that question tonight, he answered doubtfully. But let me take you to your own rest, for you must need it. With that Mr. Grewgious helped her to get her hat on again, and hung upon his arm the very little bag that was of no earthly use, and led her by the hand with a certain stately awkwardness, as if he were going to walk a minuet across Holborn, and into Furnival's Inn. At the hotel door, he confided her to the unlimited head chambermaid, and said that while she went up to see her room, he would remain below, in case she should wish it exchanged for another, or should find that there was anything she wanted. Rosa's room was airy, clean, comfortable, almost gay. The Unlimited had laid in everything omitted from the very little bag, that is to say, everything she could possibly need, and Rosa tripped down the great many stairs again, to thank her guardian for his thoughtful and affectionate care of her. "Not at all, my dear," said Mr. Grewgious, infinitely gratified. "It is I who thank you for your charming confidence and for your charming company. Your breakfast will be provided for you in a neat, compact, and graceful little sitting room appropriate to your figure, and I will come to you at 10 o'clock in the morning. I hope you don't feel very strange truly, in this strange place." "Oh no, I feel so safe. Yes, you may be sure that the stairs are fireproof," said Mr. Grewgious, "and that any outbreak of the devouring element would be perceived and suppressed by the watchman." "I did not mean that," Rosa replied. "I mean, I feel so safe from him. There is a stout gate of iron bars to keep him out," said Mr. Grewgious, smiling, "and Furnival's is fireproof, and specially watched and lighted, and I live over the way." In the stoutness of his knight-errantry, he seemed to think the last-named protection all sufficient. Chapter 21. A Recognition. Nothing occurred in the night to flutter the tired dove, and the dove arose refreshed. With Mr. Grewgious, when the clock struck 10 in the morning, came Mr. Crisparkle, who had come at one plunge out of the river at Cloisterham. "Miss Twinkleton was so uneasy, Miss Rosa," he explained to her, "and came round to Ma and me with your note, in such a state of wonder, that, to quiet her, I volunteered on the service by the very first train to be caught in the morning. I wished at the time that you had come to me, but now I think it best that you did as you did, and came to your guardian." "I did think of you," Rosa told him, "but Minor Canon Corner was so near him." "I understand. It was quite natural. I have told Mr. Crisparkle," said Mr. Grewgious, "all that you told me last night, my dear. Of course I should have written it to him immediately, but his coming was most opportune, and it was particularly kind of him to come, for he had but just gone." "Have you settled," asked Rosa, appealing to them both, "what is to be done for Helena and her brother?" "Why, really," said Mr. Crisparkle, "I am in great perplexity. If evening Mr. Grewgious, whose head is much longer than mine, and who is a whole night's cogitation in advance of me, is undecided, what must I be?" The Unlimited here put her head in at the door, after having rapped and been authorized to present herself, announcing that a gentleman wished for a word with another gentleman named Crisparkle, if any such gentleman were there. If no such gentleman were there, he begged pardon for being mistaken. "Such a gentleman is here," said Mr. Crisparkle, "but is engaged just now." "Is it a dark gentleman?" interposed Rosa, retreating on her guardian. "No, miss, more of a brown gentleman." "You are sure not with black hair?" asked Rosa, taking courage. "Quite sure of that, miss. Brown hair and blue eyes." "Perhaps," hinted Mr. Grewgious, with habitual caution, "it may be well to see him, reverend sir, if you don't object. When one is in a difficulty or at a loss, one never knows in what direction a way out may chance to open. It is a business principle of mine, in such a case, not to close up any direction, but to keep an eye on every direction that may present itself. I could relate an anecdote in point, but that it would be premature. If Miss Rosa will allow me, then let the gentleman come in," said Mr. Crisparkle. The gentleman came in, apologized, with a frank but modest grace, for not finding Mr. Crisparkle alone, turned to Mr. Crisparkle, and smilingly asked the unexpected question, "Who am I?" "You are the gentleman I saw smoking under the trees in Staple Inn a few minutes ago." "True, there I saw you. Who else am I? Mr. Crisparkle concentrated his attention on a handsome face, much sunburnt, and the ghost of some departed boy seemed to rise, gradually and dimly, in the room. The gentleman saw struggling recollection lighten up the minor canon's features, and smiling again, said, "What will you have for breakfast this morning? You are out of jam." "Wait a moment," cried Mr. Crisparkle, raising his right hand. "Give me another instant, Tartar." The two shook hands with the greatest heartiness, and then went the wonderful length, for Englishmen, of laying their hands each on the other's shoulders, and looking joyfully each into the other's face. "My old fag," said Mr. Crisparkle. "My old master," said Mr. Tartar. "You saved me from drowning," said Mr. Crisparkle. "After which you took to swimming, you know," said Mr. Tartar. "God bless my soul," said Mr. Crisparkle. "Amen," said Mr. Tartar. And then they fell to shaking hands most heartily again. "Imagine," exclaimed Mr. Crisparkle, with glistening eyes, "Miss Rosabud and Mr. Grewgious, imagine Mr. Tartar, when he was the smallest of juniors, diving for me, catching me, a big heavy senior, by the hair of the head, and striking out for the shore with me like a water giant. Imagine my not letting him sink, as I was his fag," said Mr. Tartar. "But the truth being that he was my best protector and friend, and did me more good than all the masters put together, an irrational impulse seized me to pick him up, or go down with him." "Permit me, sir, to have the honor," said Mr. Grewgious, advancing with extended hand. "For an honor I truly esteem it. I am proud to make your acquaintance. I hope you didn't take cold. I hope you were not inconvenienced by swallowing too much water. How have you been since?" It was by no means apparent that Mr. Grewgious knew what he said, though it was very apparent that he meant to say something highly friendly and appreciative. If heaven, Rosa thought, had but sent such courage and skill to her poor mother's aid, and he to have been so slight and young then, "I don't wish to be complimented upon it, I thank you. But I think I have an idea," Mr. Grewgious announced, after taking a jog trot or two across the room, so unexpected and unaccountable that they all stared at him, doubtful whether he was choking or had the cramp. "I think I have an idea. I believe I have had the pleasure of seeing Mr. Tartar's name as tenant of the top set in the house next the top set in the corner." "Yes, sir," returned Mr. Tartar. "You are right so far." "I am right so far," said Mr. Grewgious. "Tick that off," which he did, with his right thumb on his left. "May you happen to know the name of your neighbor in the top set on the other side of the party wall?" Coming very close to Mr. Tartar, to lose nothing of his face, in his shortness of sight. "Landless." "Tick that off," said Mr. Grewgious, taking another trot, and then coming back. "No personal knowledge, I suppose, sir?" "Slight, but some." "Tick that off," said Mr. Grewgious, taking another trot, and again coming back. "Nature of knowledge, Mr. Tartar?" "I thought he seemed to be a young fellow in a poor way, and I asked his leave, only within a day or so, to share my flowers up there with him, that is to say, to extend my flower garden to his windows. Would you have the kindness to take seats?" said Mr. Grewgious. "I have an idea." They complied, Mr. Tartar none the less readily, for being all abroad, and Mr. Grewgious, seated in the center, with his hands upon his knees, thus stated his idea, with his usual manner of having got the statement by heart. "I cannot as yet make up my mind whether it is prudent to hold open communication under present circumstances, and on the part of the fair member of the present company, with Mr. Neville or Miss Helena. I have reason to know that a local friend of ours on whom I beg to bestow a passing but a hearty malediction, with the kind permission of my reverend friend, sneaks to and fro, and dodges up and down. When not doing so himself, he may have some informant skulking about, in the person of a watchman, porter, or such like hanger-on of staple. On the other hand, Miss Rosa very naturally wishes to see her friend Miss Helena, and it would seem important that at least Miss Helena, if not her brother too, through her should privately know from Miss Rosa's lips what has occurred, and what has been threatened. Am I agreed with generally in the views I take? I entirely coincide with them, said Mr. Crisparkle, who had been very attentive. As I have no doubt I should, added Mr. Tartar, smiling, if I understood them. Fair and softly, sir, said Mr. Grewgious. We shall fully confide in you directly, if you will favor us with your permission. Now, if our local friend should have any informant on the spot, it is tolerably clear that such informant can only be set to watch the chambers in the occupation of Mr. Neville, he reporting to our local friend who comes and goes there. Our local friend would supply for himself, from his own previous knowledge, the identity of the parties. Nobody can be set to watch all staple or to concern himself with comers and goers to other sets of chambers unless, truly, mine. I begin to understand to what you tend, said Mr. Crisparkle, and highly approve of your caution. I needn't repeat that I know nothing yet of the why and therefore, said Mr. Tartar, but I also understand to what you tend, so let me say at once that my chambers are freely at your disposal. There, cried Mr. Grewgious, smoothing his head triumphantly, now we have all got the idea. You have it, my dear? I think I have, said Rosa, blushing a little as Mr. Tartar looked quickly towards her. You see, you go over to Staple with Mr. Crisparkle and Mr. Tartar, said Mr. Grewgious. I going in and out and in alone, in my usual way. You go up with those gentlemen to Mr. Tartar's rooms, you look into Mr. Tartar's flower garden, you wait for Miss Helena's appearance there, or you signify to Miss Helena that you are close by, and you communicate with her freely, and no spy can be the wiser. I am very much afraid I shall be. Be what, my dear? Asked Mr. Grewgious as she hesitated. Not frightened? No, not that, said Rosa shyly, in Mr. Tartar's way. We seem to be appropriating Mr. Tartar's residence so very coolly. I protest to you, returned that gentleman, that I shall think the better of it for evermore, if your voice sounds in it only once. Rosa, not quite knowing what to say about that, cast down her eyes, and turning to Mr. Grewgious, dutifully asked if she should put her hat on. Mr. Grewgious being of opinion that she could not do better, she withdrew for the purpose. Mr. Crisparkle took the opportunity of giving Mr. Tartar a summary of the distresses of Neville and his sister. The opportunity was quite long enough, as the hat happened to require a little extra fitting on. Mr. Tartar gave his arm to Rosa, and Mr. Crisparkle walked, detached, in front. Poor Eddie, thought Rosa as they went along. Mr. Tartar waved his right hand as he bent his head down over Rosa, talking in an animated way. It was not so powerful or so sun-browned when it saved Mr. Crisparkle, thought Rosa, glancing at it, but it must have been very steady and determined evening then. Mr. Tartar told her he had been a sailor, roving everywhere for years and years. When are you going to sea again? Asked Rosa. Never. Rosa wondered what the girls would say if they could see her crossing the wide street on the sailor's arm, and she fancied that the passers-by must think her very little and very helpless, contrasted with the strong figure that could have caught her up and carried her out of any danger, miles and miles without resting. She was thinking further that his far-seeing blue eyes looked as if they had been used to watch danger afar off, and to watch it without flinching, drawing nearer and nearer. When, happening to raise her own eyes, she found that he seemed to be thinking something about them. This a little confused Rosebud, and may account for her never afterwards quite knowing how she ascended with his help to his garden in the air, and seemed to get into a marvelous country that came into sudden bloom like the country on the summit of the magic beanstalk.